Good afternoon. Welcome to Citizens Tower. It's 1:33. Today's May the 12th, 2020. I'll call the Lubbock City Council to order. We are in work session this afternoon. Council, we have two items for work session discussion, followed by the need for an executive session, and then back to chambers at 4:30 for our ceremonial items. Our two items today are, first from the city manager, an update on COVID-19 to include discussion to include but not be limited to financial impact, our response, operational adjustments and impacts. Following that, we'll hear from City Bus and get an operational briefing and some information regarding the micro transit pilot program. So if there's no further, nothing else, we will begin with item 1.1. Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Now have Thank you, Mayor. I have our device connected. I believe if we can switch the inputs, it should come up on the screen.
Yeah, I don't have audio for you yet, Mr. Atkinson. Let's just check here. Okay, are you good? Do you have audio?
Testing 1, 2. No, it's on, but I don't think it's on.
I don't see him on here. I thought that was one.
They swapped them.
Try it now, Mr. Atkinson. Are you live?
I believe it's live now.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
And,
We'll call that operator error up here at the dais, okay?
Not at all.
Okay.
And Mayor, if you might switch the video inputs, I think the presentation will come up.
Yes, sir.
Everybody.
All right,
Perfect.
there we go.
Okay, we'll jump right in. I'm going to attempt to go through in a short number of slides a very high-level overview of where we stand as we respond to the coronavirus disaster. Talk a little bit about the fiscal impacts, the responses to the fiscal impacts, and also want to talk about city operations. Everybody is moving towards reopening. I'd like to present to the council where we stand with that today. So first, just kind of a reminder where all this started. The first local declaration of disaster was issued on March the 15th. On March the 17th, we activated your Emergency Operations Center. It remains active today. At a high level, what's going on? What's involved from the city standpoint in providing this response? There are 32 different city departments that currently have or have had a role in directly supporting the response efforts throughout the city. The next one talks about the length of the activation. So as of Friday, the activation had been going on for 55 days or logging 446 hours of your EOC. That is the longest EOC activation in the history of Lubbock. In fact, yesterday, we remembered the 50th anniversary of the Lubbock tornado. Prior to what's going on today, that was the longest activation event. Your EOC was open for 10 days, 24 hours a day, or a total of 240 hours in that event. And of course, EOC is open still today. Those 32 city departments represent 355 different staff members. We've logged over 29,000 hours working on the response. You see the three primary agencies, and primary in terms of the number of hours committed. Your City of Lubbock Public Health Department, headed by Ms. Catherine Wells, has already, as of Friday, logged over 8,800 hours in this response. Lubbock Police Department has also been a huge part of this, just under 7,200 hours. Lubbock Fire Rescue, a little over 3,000. When you ask what's happening at the EOC has done many things. Of course, when we first opened, we immediately set up an overflow call center. We ran that 7 days a week. We also ran all of your public information out of what we call the Joint Information Center. Where you stand today, besides overall coordination, the big effort at the EOC is logistics. So you see on the screen there, we have delivered nearly 423,000 discrete items of personal protective equipment. That's 304 individual requests for a local response agency, for institutional health care, for hospitals, for clinics. It's all runs a wide gamut. I would note there are still 74 pending requests, and despite 400,000+ pieces being a lot, that's roughly a tenth of what's been requested. So there's still more need out there. Now, thankfully, the supply chains at the state are moving much quicker. We are making resource deliveries every day. If we receive them on a Saturday, we'll get them delivered on a Saturday. But just a quick snapshot. When this event concludes, we'll have more detail. Switch over and let's talk a little bit about the financial impact. Council has heard many of these numbers before. I want to go through them today. We have estimated the revenue loss, so dollars in. We've estimated the revenue loss at roughly $5.6 million. That is largely the general fund. We do anticipate some much more minor shortfalls in a couple of your enterprise funds, mainly water and wastewater, primarily the general fund. Council will recall that we developed and implemented our response plan to this potential revenue loss in March of this year. That $5.6 million is a big number. That's only the number necessary for mid-March through the end of September, which will close our fiscal year. So, beginning mid-March, phase one of our financial response was what we called the hiring freeze, and I think it's more correctly noted today as a soft hiring freeze. And what that means, there are certain operations that their staffing is not frozen. So think police, think fire, think public health. Those are not included in that. We may well have other operations, crew operations, that if their manpower dips too far, we will add back one or two, appropriately three. But with that estimate, that's a $1.7 million savings just on the general fund. Your general fund is primarily a personnel-related operation. This does include delaying or freezing certain programs, and that's mainly in the recreational fields, and we'll get down to those later. Phase two, stop all possible discretionary spending. Of course, this is what everybody saw early on with no more travel, no more conferences. It does include a much longer list than that. For the general fund, your phase two savings are $2.2 million. Phase three was to stop appropriate general fund cash capital projects. So what do we mean by appropriate? Well, in this case, we made a conscious decision not to freeze a capital project if doing so would actually cost you more in the long run. So the number one example of that is street maintenance. Your street maintenance is cash funded, it will continue. If we were to stop that, we can generate a tremendous additional savings. But when we roll back to that, be it next year or the year after, the cost will have gone up dramatically. So does not include those, but does include all the rest where we could. $3.2 million, carrying you down to an identified savings of $7.1 million versus the estimated loss of 5.66. So we're about 1.4 to the good. That's your bubble, so to speak, on this. I think most importantly, as we finish on this one, this does not contemplate City Council reaching into the reserve funds. This is all current. You have a current revenue loss. We are meeting it with a current reduction in expenditures. And I'll show your general fund cash balances here in a moment.
Before you continue, Mr. O'Neill, Chief Ferguson, is the sound good back there where you guys are? You good? You're good? Okay, thank you. Please continue, Mr. Atkinson.
I do want to highlight a couple of other items that are not general fund. First is your hotel occupancy tax fund. The hotel motel industry has absolutely been hit very hard. In fact, one of the hardest in the community. Your occupancy rates as of last Wednesday, which is our most recent data, are about 1/2 of what they were a year ago. And that sounds tough, but I would remind council that if we had done this 3 weeks ago, they were running at about 70% of what they were prior year. That industry's been hit very hard. How does that impact your city budget? Civic Center, the operational loss is offset with hot tax revenue. Visit Lubbock is funded through hot tax revenue. Certain attractions, primarily the Buddy Holly Museum, and certain small debt service funds are serviced by your hot tax revenues. Looking at all of those very closely, and we should have estimates back to you probably in the next 2 to 4 weeks on that. The other one's the airport. Now, the airport is doing better. We finished last week only 85% down. Council will recall that we ran several weeks for our average daily travelers. And a traveler is both a passenger and a crew member. Your average daily passengers were down over 90%. And in fact, we went weeks and didn't process 100 a day. We're back up into the low 200s right now, so we sure hope that continues. The good news here, your airport did receive over $9 million in relief funds that were directly assigned to them. We believe that the budgetary impacts to the airport will largely be offset by those relief funds. But I do think these two go together. You see the airlines down, you see the rental cars down, you see the use of our local hotels and motels go down. Jump over to a little potential good news on the finances. Additional details came out yesterday on the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or the CRF. You might have heard nearly 3 weeks ago when cities and counties over 500,000 received a direct grant from the federal government. We're now in the group that's under 500. So the announcement yesterday, we will be allocated $55 per capita. We can have a 20% advance or a draw. After that is expensed out, we can try to draw or to apply for the remainder of our $55 per person. This is not to be used for revenue replacement. That has been very consistent in the federal and the state guidance. Not all the guidance is complete. We do know it can be used for direct replacement of dollars that we have spent in response. We do know that in the over 500,000 cities, they were allowed to use those dollars for direct assistance to the public. So we're certainly evaluating that and look forward to bringing it back to you. Your actual dollars are on the bottom of the slide for the city of Lubbock. They use 256,600 as your population. Multiply that out, that's a little over $14 million allocated, and your initial advance will be $2.82 million. Council, this will cover expenses through the end of December this year. Later today, you will consider affirming the mayor's disaster declaration. If you do so, when that one expires, we will come back with a very, we'll call it a more minimal disaster declaration, but we will need to ask you to carry a disaster declaration open through the end of December. That's how we maintain the eligibility for these funds. There may be no other restrictions in it, and hopefully there's none needed, but know that that's coming. Okay, we have been through a process. Have that slide in there twice? Nope, just not smart enough to switch it. We have completed your annual city credit review process. I'm going to go very quickly. You'll hear more later today. The city annually has its credit ratings reviewed by 2 agencies, Fitch, Standard & Poor's. Fitch, your general obligation rating started as the AA+ stable. It remains so. Water and sewer was a AA- stable. Our outlook was upgraded in that review. So water and sewer through Fitch, AA- positive. Standard & Poor's, We started with a AA plus stable in the general obligation. We remain so. We started with a AA minus stable in water and sewer, and we remain so. The two highlights I would note on that ratings process occurred in mid-April, and it included a very detailed review of our financial response plans, and we maintained right where we were. Second thing I would note, Standard & Poor's back in April issued a national advisory for everybody to expect a one-step downgrade. Your city of Lubbock came through their reviews with no downgrades. So I really want to thank Mr. Kostelich and his crew on that. Switch over and we'll talk a little bit about operational impacts. Start with your libraries. Note that your libraries carry the Lubbock Safe logo. Curbside service at the libraries resumed on May the 4th. Homebound delivery resumed on May the 13th. We anticipate opening the libraries at 25% occupancy on May the 18th. That will be with the exception of Patterson. Of course, Patterson, we're doing direct home delivery. We will continue to do that. That's also where you're operating your City of Lubbock testing site. That is the one site in town that we can guarantee you a test, and we can guarantee you no cost whatsoever. So we do wish to continue to run that site. Virtual summer reading program will go on this year. You may have seen in Forbes magazine, your library was recognized for some of their online efforts. I'm very proud of them. Museums are also Lubbock safe. They opened May the 9th at 25% occupancy. We've not made a call on the summer showcase concert series. We do think it's possible for that to occur in June. There's a few more dominoes that need to fall and additional information we need to make that call. We do not anticipate summer camps at the museum this year. And I'll talk a little more about summer camps when we get into Parks and Recreation. Garden and Arts, if we were to reopen that facility, we will do so in association with community centers. And we'll talk about that and some of the concerns. Moving into parks, the Burgess Rushing Tennis Center did reopen on May the 1st. We are not having tournaments and we're not having camps, but it is open and available for use, and we encourage people to do so. Your athletic complexes are closed for now. There are various leagues throughout the city that have already canceled their spring and summer programs, but not all. We will continue to reevaluate that over the next 30 days, and we'll continue to look for state guidance. We do expect some of that to come out, hopefully soon. Pools. Right now, we're not planning to open the pools. It's not time yet, but we're getting close. We typically open them Memorial Day. We'll keep looking at it. I do want to note that everything has been affected by the virus, including the lifeguard certification program. So now that program operates on a more spread out basis and with fewer and fewer students standing for certification. We estimate that it would take roughly 50 days to hire and train the staff. Would also note that a significant part of your savings in the hiring freeze is not opening those pools. So at the moment, I'm going to put this out for y'all's discussion. I think after I finish, we'll circle back to that. Just want to get that in front of you. Summer camps. We do run summer camps through our community centers. Right now, we do not plan to open those. And for myself and the staff, it's as simple as if it's not safe for the students to be together at schools, it's hard to think it can be safe to put them together in those community centers. Also part of your savings. Community and adult activity centers. We've not selected an opening date, nor have we said we will not. First thing we're going to do is continue our senior meal program. It's both curbside and delivery. We're in week 8 of that program. We are well over 400 meals a week through that program. It actually is continuing to grow. We've had weeks up to 450. Your parks, your playgrounds are open. Your park amenities are closed, things like pavilion rentals. That could easily change, but again, we're looking for some changes from the state and some further guidance from that. Lubbock Animal Services. I think council saw when we wrapped up April, they continue to have really good numbers. They're very creative out there. That group has done very well. Adoptions are by appointment only. We actually bring an animal outside, take them out to the people. They're allowed to use all the grounds and the facilities. If you choose to take one of our pets, paperwork is also done at the curbside. We have been closing the adoption process on Saturday and 1 hour early during the week, and that's just to let us keep up with the rest of the work in the shelter. May 18th, we will go back to doing appointments for stray intakes and also for adoption tours. We will limit that facility to 10 people that are not on staff, and we're going to ask our volunteers to work in groups not more than 3, and we're going to limit their shifts to 2 hours. They're ready to come back, and we want them to come back. We need the help. We just want to do that on a controllable basis. Talk to you about the court. The Office of Court Administration has issued guidelines that prevent in-person court hearings until June the 1st. Court business today is conducted by mail, by phone, and online, and it will continue to do that. Judge Hernandez, Amy Tyag, Bill Howerton are putting all of the required plans in place. The Office of Court Administration has required a very specific set of rules. They will bring those for approval, and those will go to the mayor, to the Public Health Authority, and to the regional presiding judge. So the courts are taking very, very deliberate and very measured steps. Your local municipal court will be prepared to do that as well. Public health. We saw the numbers. We know how much work that group's doing. They're not done yet. They intend to resume on a modified basis their clinical services on May the 18th. So the STD clinic will be 2 days a week. The immunization clinics will be 2 days a week. And they're actually going to, if you've been in their building, they're going to kind of flip it over. Everything will run through one side of the house while the other side remains focused on the coronavirus. Catherine and her team are working with our school districts to see if we can do some back-to-school vaccination clinics for them over the summer. Always a need for that, and we don't want that to fall out. Talk about the tower. Council, welcome to Citizens Tower, your new chambers, and the first meeting and such. One-stop shop is open. It's open to the public. We do have spacing and other health precautions in place. Your tower is Lubbock safe as well. Through that one-stop shop, you can go to planning, engineering, building safety, environmental health, code enforcement, and accounting. You can do all that in one place. Work your way from one end of the counter to the other. We have brought the majority of the departments that are moving to the tower, either wholly or partially to the tower at this point as well. The city manager, city attorney, city secretary offices are here. Communications and marketing, facilities, business development, accounting, finance, IT, human resources, public works. We have more coming starting again tomorrow. Purchasing, print shop, traffic engineering and the traffic management center, your GIS group, vital statistics, parks and recreation, and internal audit. We will soon be out not only of the old city hall in its entirety, but also in the other places where we've kind of pigeonholed some of these operations. Really appreciate the staff helping us with that. Moving in the midst of all this has been a bit of fun, but they're here and the building's open. If you come down to the lobby during the day, you'll see folks coming in and taking advantage of what we have to offer. I apparently had a slide that fell off. It was supposed to have the general fund reserve balances, so if you would allow me, I'm just going to read those numbers to you. We begin the current fiscal year with a general fund reserve balance of just a little over $57 million. The budget included, the budget you're in today, spending down $3.5 million of that. That's $3.5 million that's above the policy number, and it's been this council's guidance that we put those dollars back to work for Lubbock, which you did when you approved your budget last summer. We need to maintain the general fund balance at $44 million. And the purpose of those reserve funds is to meet emergencies. We have a policy level stated. That's the number to meet it. Right now, with the current situation, your revenue loss projected versus the estimated savings we can achieve, again, all cash, you'll still end the year with the $44 million balance. We will not have touched it. and you'll have something in the neighborhood of $6.5 million over that policy level reserve. Those are subject to change. I suggest if they do, they're likely to move in our favor, not to move away from us. Mayor, City Council, with that, I'll stop, and I do apologize that wasn't on a slide. It's much easier to see.
Yeah, would you make sure you, if you don't mind, emailing that to us later, if you would do that, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, council, let's open the floor for discussion, for questions or discussion. If you just hit your little microphone button, I'll recognize you. Mr. Massengill.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Atkinson, talk a little bit about the bond rating, the AA minus, and what we might be able to do, or what opportunities we might have to continue to improve that bond rating.
So the bond rating on the AA minus is on your water sewer credit. Council, remember, that's a brand new rating. This is only the second time that it has gone through. We chose to do that very deliberately. In the past, Lubbock used the general fund as the cosigner, so to speak, for all of your utility fund debt. That is not a bad practice, it's not a bad habit, and it guaranteed a good credit rate. What it does, though, when you fill out the comparative metrics, and these are mainly what the state of Texas uses to evaluate us, it appears that you have a very, very large outstanding general fund debt. You don't. That debt is being paid by these utilities. It was just guaranteed by the general fund. Taking the step to create a rating for those funds allows you to do what is called revenue debt. It stands on its own. AA minus is an excellent rating for a brand new fund that has not had it before. The next step in improving that is really going to be continued efforts as we shift the proportion of the basic cost of your system to being covered by the base charge of your system rather than by consumption. We were in a unique position on the rating this year. Last spring was wet and water sales was down. Now, fortunately, if it could be fortunate, it got dry and it got hot. And that started on us in early April. So we were able to bend the curve and show a pretty dramatic increase in water sales. And that's only important because your total revenue divided by your total expense gives you your coverage. Last year we were fully funded, but revenues were down, and it's all based on sales. So I think it's a good move. You'll see refinancing efforts that we're making to take this old revenue debt that's inside the general obligation and now pull it back over where it goes, and we'll continue.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Joy. I don't know why you.
I don't know that I'm on mic. Probably not.
Go ahead. Are you logged in? Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have gotten everybody to. Council, make sure if you're not logged in that you log in. While we're waiting on Ms. Joy, Mr. Chidas.
Thank you, Mayor. Statement first to start off with. Ms. Wells and her department, fantastic job. And I say that firsthand because I was there visiting with them Friday afternoon. I was greeted by some very knowledgeable people, very comforting. They told me exactly what I was about to experience. Somewhat uncomfortable, but very needed. I needed to show up because my family doctor recommended that I go and get that COVID-19 exam done. My results came back, of course, obviously negative, or I wouldn't be here. But again, it was very, 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 very comfortable. Mr. Ray Covarrubias met me there at the drive, along with an aide. He kind of was making some jokes about it at the same time. He said that he's never made grown men tear up like he has in the last few weeks. But again, Ms. Wells, Jared, all the staff that have reached out there to do your part, very much appreciated. I can't thank you enough and all the staff that are out there. Question, Mr. Atkinson, Parks and Rec, and I ask because I've been asked by the public, where are we? Is there a possibility? And the question is about Little League. And I said, for right now, direction. Yes, no, possibility. Has it been thought of?
Yes, there is a possibility. There are some of the independent little leagues that have already called off. They've canceled. Right now, we believe the guidance, actually the orders from the state of Texas are not going to allow team sports. We do expect that to change. We just don't know when and to what effect. The beauty of the Little League type programs here, and to a large extent the soccer programs here, they don't carry any significant expense for the city. Those individual leagues carry that on their own. If we're allowed to open, and it may be in a modified fashion, but if we're allowed to do that, we would absolutely consider allowing those facilities to open and host those kids. Just right now, we do not think that's allowed.
Total agreement.
And that's allowed at the state level, not at the local level.
Okay.
It's not a Lubbock decision, it's a state of Texas.
And my conversation with the people that have made the phone call is we don't want to jeopardize the health of our youth. Because with that said, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Mr. Atkinson, I might remind you, even though when you're trying to talk, I know you're talking at him, but don't forget your microphone's pretty sensitive. You want to make sure you talk to the microphone if you would. Ms. Joy.
Well, this has been a perfect storm. We were right in the throes of finishing up here when the virus hit us for real. So I have to say thank you to all the staff because they've been doing double duty trying to get us in to this facility and at the same time deal with the outbreak and to do something that we haven't done to my knowledge, and that's half staff working at home and half staff here. So it's a new experiment for everyone, and I think staff, you've done that admirably. To Lubbock Police Department, thank you for all that you all have done on this quarantine process. Lubbock Fire, same to you. It took everybody. It took council members, trying to let people know that we're going to follow social distancing, okay? We're going to wear masks. We're going to do what we can to make this work. Wanted to point out on vital statistics, that's part of Ms. Garza's department. They have their own separate entrance here now, and so when they get here, so I think that's a real benefit for the citizens. We will get through this, but we have to keep reminding people that some of us have to make sacrifices for others. And I think our staff has made those sacrifices, and I fully expect citizens to do likewise. I've had the privilege, I think along with Mr. Christian, to deliver some of our Lubbock Safe decals, and the people are excited to get them. And I'm excited to see what they're doing. I pulled up at Discount Storage on Saturday morning to find the germ truck there with the little guys in their white uniforms. They looked like space people. They were there to do the cleaning that we require for those Lubbock Safe certifications. And so I think people from all walks are trying, but we've got to continue to have that uppermost in our minds, because it doesn't matter who you are. You may be young and think that you'll get it and you'll recover, but the person next door to you or next to you may not. And so let's continue to work on that as a city, and let's get past this.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Points well made. Ms. Patterson-Harris? Just turn yourself off, turn it back on again.
On?
There you
Okay,
go.
there you go.
There you go.
Just trying to get used to all of this new equipment. I have several things, Mr. City Manager, if you will. The first one will be along the line of financial impact with regard to the coronavirus relief fund. Have we been given, or do we have any idea with regard to what the guidelines will be in order to utilize those funds? Or are we giving it a stab at it? I know they can't be used, if I heard you correctly, operating expenses, but
We do have portions of those guidelines. I might suggest kind of the final step is going to be how others farther up the chain interpret some of the remaining guidelines. So you're correct, we cannot use it for revenue replacement. And in its simplest form, if I expect us to lose $4 million in sales tax, I cannot charge the relief fund $4 million to give me the sales tax back. Instead, and it's very plain and very simple, any of our direct expenses, so all of these efforts, all of those hours that you saw from your police department, from your public health department, from your fire department, truly from a large number of departments, those are just the biggest numbers, that is charged back against this. We have spent some dollars. When this first began, we had our logistics team out. We would buy any PPE that we could find. So that's a direct expense. And the majority of that PPE was not used by your city staff. It was provided to other entities that were in need. We know the fund will cover certain remote or teleworking type expenses. Over a not long period of time, we spent a very significant amount of money doing those deep fog cleans in city facilities. Those facilities that we were still working in, and certainly for the period of time that we had some limited public interaction. I owe that to the employees and I owe that to our customers to be able to do that. Those expenses are reimbursable. Some of the interpretation that we still seek is that ability to use these dollars for direct assistance to the public. And I just can't answer that definitively right now.
okay. Again, one area I'm concerned about, I have a question about, is regarding the libraries, of course. And you spoke about the virtual reading program that will be in existence for the summer. What does that look like? How does that work? If you can share with us. I'm sorry, I'm full of questions today.
I may have to come back to that when I have
Okay.
notes on it, but I didn't put those into the slides.
You know, it's a great question. I think Ms. McKenzie, is she coming at our next meeting? Is that right?
You'll have a library presentation
Okay.
on the 26th. So the way they'll do that, and this is across the state of Texas. We're participating on a larger scale. Online sign up, reading logs provided to all children, to all youth, to any adult readers. The programming is really what's virtual. So you'll log in and your presentations, your discussions, be that from outside pros or from in-house pros, will do that. We will still do the prize program,
Okay.
but you'll either come and pick up those prizes from us, or we'll, again, do the curbside delivery and drop them off. We want everybody to be able to do that.
I mentioned that because with so many of the changes, there's going to be a decrease in the amount of activities for young people, and we definitely want them to be aware of this and make it, kind of reach out and make sure we get their participation throughout the summer. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we provide that information. I'd imagine with regard to the pools and whatnot, a lot of our lifeguards are usually our tech students, or a lot of them are made up of our tech students. So are we looking at a way to, when we get ready to commence with the class, to try to get those lifeguards ready if we're looking at the pools opening, if they are, what do we do? What are we looking to do to draw other individuals to try to help us out along these lines? Have we begun to think about that?
We have begun to think. We have built the schedules for what it would take to hire, to train, and to put them in place. What we have not done is begun that process.
Okay.
And number one, until I know more, and something I possibly should have said earlier, when we talk about financial impacts, the only sales tax report I have is the report from the month of March. Now, it did go down. It only went down about half of what we have built into the model that produces that 5.66 million loss. Until we get the April numbers, which we will not get till the first Wednesday in June, I'm pretty uncomfortable undoing those estimated savings to start pushing forward on these services.
Okay. Also, I want to say a huge thank you, of course, to all of the city staff, everything that they've done during this trying times, but a special shout out to the folks who were providing the meals for our seniors during the course of this time. I tell you what, I don't know what some of those seniors would have done otherwise. I have a dad that participated in the program, and I tell you was right on point in providing meals for the seniors. The numbers, 400 meals, that's a lot of folk. That's a lot of eating, which tells us if we had not had it available, that it really would have been a huge issue within the community. So kudos, big shout out, and balloons and whatever else to those folks. I really appreciate it. Just want to throw this out here, and I promise I'm done, Mr. Mayor. Given everything we've been having to encounter throughout the COVID-19 outbreak, do we think it might be something to look at that we begin to maybe provide mobile units within the different departments, the library, the health department, and all? Because heaven forbid, if something like this happens again, we're going to be maybe in causing an imposition for some things. But if we had those mobile units or access to them, maybe we can do some things in a different way and more immediately in providing care, testing, materials, or whatever. Just something to think about. Thank you.
And if I could speak to that first, to the senior meal program. On many days, we are providing more meals on a curbside or delivery basis than we provided when people came in and ate the buffet style meals.
Yeah.
So there's a lesson there.
Yeah.
There's a lesson. As it relates to mobile delivery of service, you're the second one that's mentioned to me what I would call the bookmobile concept.
Yeah.
I understand at one time we possibly had one. To my knowledge, we do not today. But that's also a lesson learned. We have two of our assistant city managers that I've got them actually sitting back and looking at the changes we've made to try to adapt. And I think some of those are likely to become permanent.
Good.
And they may well be things like, we know that in many of the services that we've built as a legacy service, the delivery today, what the customer expects today is not what the customer expected 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we need to not lose those lessons, and this has kind of put them right up in front of us.
Yes, sir. I had the opportunity to read the article on the library services here, and it was a great article. Kudos to Ms. McKenzie for what's been implemented and carried out, so.
There's a lot of lessons there, good ones.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson-Harris. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hold on a sec, you turned yourself off. Now you're back on. Mayor Pro Tem.
The $55 per capita that we got from the state relief fund, the cities or counties over 500,000 population, was that calculated the same? Have we looked at that?
Close, but it was provided on a direct grant basis.
No. He's being very kind. I would underscore and put that in bold. No.
Thank you, Mayor. That, can we, to Ms. Patterson's point, can we use some of those dollars for this added meal program?
The meal program is reimbursable.
Okay.
It is. And just as a half step back from that, City Council has already accepted additional funding on the Corona, not literally CRF, but on similar programs for community development and for public health. Other things like the provision of those meals are absolutely eligible, both under a CD program or under the CRF. So what you'll see your staff do is dividing out the best place from which to draw those dollars, leaving others available. Your Patterson testing site is 100% funded by the additional public health dollars that this council approved 2 meetings ago.
Thank you.
Ms. Joy?
Just a follow-up on Mr. Griffith's question about how was the over 500,000 people per capita. I think everyone also needs to know that the first 55% went to the state of Texas.
That is correct. The state of Texas received roughly a little over $11 billion, I believe. 55% to the state, 45% to the localities. In round numbers, about $3 billion went to the over 500,000 population. That's cities or counties, 6 cities, 12 counties. And then we're down to about 1.85 that distributes to the rest of us.
Thank you.
Mr. Christian?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions in regards to this incredible building that we're now calling home. What sort of health screenings are we going to put in place for both employees and visitors to this building? Because when we're fully occupied, we're going to have a bunch of people coming in here at a relatively short window in the mornings, and so I'm curious. There's got to be something that you got in your back pocket ready to put in place, because we have had a lot of people coming in and out of this building as we've been moving, and I know it's almost impossible to do screenings, but at some point in time we're going to have something in place for people to be screened. And I'll have another question after I have that.
Well, a great question. The one that has caused me the most concern are the elevators. Early in the morning, late in the evening. Of course, we now have the two passenger elevators are up and running. When we finish the move, the big service elevator is also available to people. So we'll get to spread out a little. I have asked Stephen Walker, our Director of Environmental Health, to produce for us kind of a best practice on elevators. All the guidance that's been out around us, I've not seen one on elevators. Stephen and his team have done that. I have not finished the review, but we'll issue that as a policy. We're going to continue the screenings that we've been doing in the individual offices. You'll notice if you step out into this lobby, you've got 2 beautiful sitting areas, and they're both roped completely off. They'll remain that way. If you go down to the one-stop shop, half of its seating is kind of a couch or divan type piece of furniture and then some chairs. We've got all those sheeted off. And I think until we decide or know what the new normal is, we'll continue that. And that, if we're protecting ourselves, we're protecting the customers and vice versa.
And a second question that's come to mind in the last couple of days, especially when we've done such a good job of people testing within the communities, but sometimes we don't get those test results. People don't get their test results back within, immediately. I know we have the quick test over at Friendship, but for the most part, it's 24 to 48 hours after somebody gets tested.
Correct.
And the protocol is once you get tested, you need to stay at home, if I understand that correctly.
That is absolutely correct. If you have been tested, you self-isolate until you have the results of those tests.
Assuming you're symptomatic, that would be, right, Mr. Atkinson?
If you're symptomatic, that actually falls into the existing orders, and that's basically a 14-day hold or 3 consecutive days, 72 hours, no symptoms, without taking things like to reduce your fever and so forth.
Well, where I'm getting with this, and that was my follow-up, so if you're symptomatic, you're supposed to stay self-quarantine for 14 days. Well, with the city policy, especially with hourly workers, are they continually paid for those days off if they are self-quarantined? And then let me just follow up a question. Have we talked, or do we have any idea what employers across town, what their policy is if somebody has to be self-quarantined and are out of work for that number of days? It just, because I don't want I want us to do everything we can to make sure that people are not penalized for doing the right thing in regards to their living and how they have an income, because 14 days could be a lifetime for someone that's an hourly wage and having a job that's, most salaried people are pretty much covered. So I don't know if we've had any discussion. Maybe there's something we could talk to the Chamber of Commerce and see if there's any sort of surveys of what are different employees and businesses doing when somebody is self-quarantined for 14 days. And and that's all I have. I'll be anxious to listen to that question.
So I think you're on the right track as it relates to what are other employers doing. We don't have or maintain access to that information, but it might be a very good topic for the chamber and possibly for Lita and Market Level, to look into that. I do not believe state law allows you to require to make that happen, to mandate that be provided. But just as it works for our folks, it would work for any folks. You have two additional, I don't know what you call them, incentives, but you have two additional programs that were created by the federal government. One is an extended sick leave, and one is an extended Family and Medical Leave Act program. Plus, you have the additional unemployment insurance that's available.
Well, that's good to know. I just think we need to let people know. I don't want to take any sort of fear factor from people of not going out and getting tested if they do have symptoms or even slight symptoms, because we want as much testing going on all the time, and we want to encourage people to do that instead of discouraging them in different ways. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. I know Mr. Massengill's on to speak. I think some of what you spoke of, Randy and Mr. Atkinson, I think we could ask Lert to weigh in on also. I've just started to see some pretty good guidance hit around big buildings and reopening large office buildings. And so Steve, I'd be interested in your thoughts around that, but I think that's a big part of building confidence in people going back to work is to make sure that environments are safe.
Yeah, I agree. I think Lert can look at that. We haven't talked about big buildings. We've talked about single-person office buildings and some things that were related to the governor's guidance, but that's absolutely something we can look at. I wanted to answer Mr. Christian's question. I can tell you from a small business perspective, those businesses that are participating in some of the SBA relief programs, that there's requirements in those programs that if you're participating about how you handle compensation to employees that are either symptomatic and have to leave work, or they have to care for someone at home that's symptomatic. And it's all about continuity of compensation. So a lot of businesses, and there's a lot of businesses that have taken advantage of that within our community, should be or are aware of those rules.
And the thing I'm thinking of is just make sure we communicate those to the employees too, and how well are they being communicated to employees so they know that there is some options and there is some help if they do have to be quarantined, self-quarantined for those 14 days. Because we're just coming, and what I'm thinking, we're just getting out of where people are going back to work. And they've been working at home for a long time. And a lot of the times these people are not sick enough to not be able to work at home. So I just think it'd be a healthy dialogue, and maybe it is something we tap on in the chamber to see what people are doing out there. Because I think we're talking about a new normal for a lot of people that are going to be required to stay home for 14 days, but they're healthy enough to work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. Ms. Patterson-Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point this out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Howerton. I believe that community development is working with a lot of the individuals that go through testing and are found to have a need to be quarantined or what have you, and they're assisting them with any type of rental assistance and personal things from day to day, if I'm not mistaken. So those individuals that find themselves in that position, there is help in that fashion to help with some things that they would normally use their own income to take care of.
Call 311. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just checking. Before we move on, it looks like everybody's had a chance to. I have a couple questions and maybe a comment. Soccer complex. I know we've kept all our complexes closed. I know we were targeting a Memorial Day tournament. I assume that's probably been postponed. Is that accurate?
It's my understanding that it's been postponed but not canceled.
Okay. I think I'd like us to think in the from the perspective of that our cost savings, we need to be real careful that they're not impacting services that we provide on a normal basis. So let's give me an example. If we felt like it was safe to reopen pools, I would like us to really seriously consider, you know, what's the cost of reopening the pools if it's doable. You know, the reality of it is if you had 50 days to where we are today, you open around 4th of July. If school by chance starts, I think, which when they're targeting to in mid to late August, you would be open for about 5 weeks. I think you have the question about whether it's even worth operating them for that period of time. But in any of our decisions where we have assumed some financial savings, when we feel like there is a way to safely reopen or begin providing those services, I sure want us to evaluate the value to the citizens and look for another way to cover those costs. I mean, for instance, we've already, you know, our April numbers, March sales tax that we'll get this month are 5% better than what we thought they would be. That's quite a bit you know, that gives us a little bit of advantage on the revenue side. And so that's just one thought. The other question I have is about the triathlon. I know that's scheduled, the triathlon, that's scheduled for the last very, very end of June. Can you update us on that?
I do think there's a possibility of having the triathlon. This morning early, we received some guidance from the Ironman Corporation. Not had a chance to read it. If there's a way to do that safely, it's very likely that the Buffalo Springs Lake Lubbock Ironman Triathlon would be the first one to occur in the country.
Thank you. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, if I
Please.
I neglected, I intended to call on Councilman Massengale to give us the update on the numbers for your Lubbock Safe program.
That'd be great.
Referenced it and never did.
Yeah, let's close with that, and we'll move to the next item on our work session. Mr. Massengale.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. 20 citizens, in addition to Ms. Joy and myself, continue to work on well-thought-out guidance as we layer on top of what the governor announces can open. So last Friday, personal care businesses open. That's your hair care, salons, cosmetologists, and have had many of those businesses certified to become Lubbock Safe. On May 18th, gyms and fitness-related facilities will be able to open, and this week we're working on guidance for those types of businesses as well. We've worked closely with our school districts on safe and responsible guidelines for them to conduct graduation ceremonies. Those of you who have children in those schools that are high school age, you've probably seen some information on that. And then we're trying to work as far into the future as we can, understanding what the world looks like when our campuses open in the fall, and understanding we've worked with the leaders of the various educational institutions in our community, understanding what their reopening plans are as they are developed now, and what their needs are to open safely. And one of those items is testing kits on those campuses, and so we're working closely with them, as well as we've talked to several people, including Congressman Arrington, who's willing to help with that. So we think that's something that would give our campuses an edge as they reopen in the fall. I'm happy to announce that we have 623 self-certified businesses as of this morning. And any business that would like to be certified and has not gone through the process, you can go to www.mylubbock.us/Lubbock Safe to start that process.
Thank you, Mr. Massengale. Okay, we'll now move to item 1.2 on work session. It's an operational briefing from City Bus and an update on the microtransit pilot project. We'll get Mr. Mandrell loaded up. Okay, Mr. Mandrell, good evening.
for them to come back out and conduct our public meetings and to finish the plan that they are putting together for us. There's several things that would have to occur in order for us to be able to hold, to stick to this timeline, including travel from the consultants, and then for public meetings and gatherings to occur. So basically, for right now, we're targeting a mid-June preliminary preferred alternative public meeting, public input meetings. And then that'll give them about 5 weeks to create those, any adjustments they need based on the public feedback. And then they'll be back in front of you, hopefully for a presentation at the end of July. And then with the final adoption of the plan, or final plan coming back in sometime in mid to late August.
Mr. Mandel, let me interrupt you for 1 minute. How's the sound back there, Mr. O'Neill? Can you hear Mr. Mandel? Okay.
Try this again. Can we go back to the timeline real quick?
No, just please continue.
From there. All right. So the kind of the big project that we've got going on right now is a microtransit pilot project that we're working to get up and get launched, hopefully within the next week's time frame. So the way this came about is obviously due to COVID-19, we had a significant decline in ridership on our fixed route service. In response to that, when working with Mr. Howerton, we made the decision to reduce our service from 30-minute headways in the peak times, meaning morning and evening. We reduced that, got rid of that 30-minute headways, and we're doing hourly service all day long. And then, which also created some additional service gaps. We already had service gaps, and that's why we were going through the plan to begin with. But taking out that 30-minute service window also created some more service gaps. And then the bigger thing is we need to adapt to the changing environment with COVID-19 that's creating, in the transit industry, that's creating a whole host of opportunities for agencies to relook at the service they provide and to adapt to those changes and to provide a better service for the people. So that's kind of where the microtransit idea came from. It's identified in our comprehensive operational analysis as a type of service that they were looking into to launch here. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And how these would tie together is through this process, we'd be able to get a lot of data from this pilot project, and it'll help us with future service decisions. The microtransit service is a very innovative and a very flexible service, and it's a relatively quick implementation to get it off the ground. The company that we're working with, we will be the second fastest deployment that they have gotten out there. I was hoping to be the fastest, but we'll talk about this in a minute, but Google Play is holding us up. And then, most importantly, this is a service that FTA is allowed to be paid for through the CARES Act. So just a kind of a quick reminder of what microtransit is. It's a demand response type of system, and it's all going to be done by using a phone app or calling in to schedule that ride to our dispatch services. So it's very, very much like you would see through a TNC, the Ubers, Lyfts of the world, but this is a little bit different into where it would be every trip has to go through a dispatch portal, but then would have to be, it would have to be attempted to be a shared ride concept, so it wouldn't be, you know, a solo ride. It has to be created into a shared ride. So project implementation, we got the contract signed with Spare Labs back on April 24th, and on that day, we did a kickoff meeting with them to get the project started. We're to the point of this week, on tomorrow, actually, we're going to do kind of a test launch. So we'll have a couple of vehicles out, and we'll have a couple of photo trips that we're scheduling and calling in to make sure the app and the functionality is all there, and the tablets are working and that sort of thing. So when we get ready to launch, we will have all the kind of, as many kinks as we can worked out. And so we're tentatively scheduled to launch on Monday, May 18th. I say tentative because the app has been approved through Apple, so that app is in the App Store right now to be downloaded. We are being held up by Google Play. So we don't want to deploy the service until we have both apps in both stores ready to be downloaded. So we are waiting for Google Play to publish that app and make it available to the public. So here's kind of the service parameters that we've come up with, and really relying on the expertise of Spare and their knowledge of the services that they've deployed around the country and the world for that matter. So right now this project is really intended to supplement our fixed route system because we reduce that down to hourly service all day long. This service, we are looking at this to supplement that fixed route ridership. So right now, we are looking to run the service Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. 7 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. And kind of taking a step back from this, these parameters through this pilot project, we'll be able to change these parameters and depending upon the information we're getting back from the public, and if we need to change the service area or times and days and that sort of thing, we'll be able to do that. Trip bookings will occur through the app and by phone only. And for this on-demand microtransit pilot project, all the trips will be scheduled same day or on demand. So we won't, for this service, we will not be taking advanced bookings. We have it set up for a 10-minute pickup flexibility, which means if the passenger schedules a ride to be picked up at 8 o'clock or 8 a.m. or whatever, there'll be a 10-minute window, so we could push it back as much as 10 minutes before a vehicle pulls up to pick them up. And that's kind of what the vendor suggested on that. That could be tweaked depending upon, you know, ridership levels and that sort of thing, what that looks like. But 10 minutes kind of a good starting point on this. The big thing about this is we're going to do everything we can to commingle trips between our paratransit service and this on-demand service. So the reason why we're able to provide the service in the area that we're looking at providing is because we'll have the vehicles out there providing ADA paratransit trips. And so this will allow them, if they have some time between the pickup and drop off and somebody's kind of on the way, this will allow them to kind of deviate, pick this other passenger up, and then make the drop offs along the route. So we'll be utilizing the same vehicles, and it'll just be, you know, on one single vehicle, you could have multiple different types of passengers on that vehicle. And then so we're using our paratransit service area as the kind of the service area for this pilot project, which is extends 1 mile outside of our fixed routes. So this is the rider application. This is from Apple. We don't have screenshots of Google, obviously, but the logo there in the top left-hand corner, that's the actual logo of the app. So when you download it, that's the way it'll show up on your phone. Right now, if you just go to the Apple Play Store, for those that have Apple, you can just type in City Bus on Demand, and it should pop up right there. You can download that, and you will be in the application. The first kind of screenshot is just where you would go to, as a rider to search for a destination. So you just type your destination into that where to box, and you will also type in your destination, then click to request a ride, and then it'll give you all your information. It'll give you an estimated pickup time and an estimated drop-off time. And then it's all GPS, much like you would see with like the Uber and Lyft style. You can watch the vehicle pull up, see where it's at. It won't show you the entire route, but it'll show you as within probably the 5 to 10 minute window. It'll show you that vehicle coming on because they don't want people to be stalking the vehicles and whatnot for safety and security reasons. They limit it to how much actual GPS data you can see from the vehicle standpoint. Then that vehicle will pull up and pick you up, and then it'll take you and drop you off at your destination. The way that it's kind of set up is where the trip length should hopefully at this point in time will be anywhere between 15 and a maximum of 30 minutes, depending on how busy it is and what the distance the rider is traveling. And then this is just a very, very quick slide about Spare Labs. So they were actually founded in 2015, a relatively new technology startup company. They're based out of Vancouver, Canada. They have Dallas Area Rapid Transit is a client of theirs. Denton County Transit Authority is a client. And the one that Lincoln, Nebraska, Star Training Lincoln, Nebraska, I've spent quite a bit of time on the phone with them and understanding how they deployed the service. They're the ones that they deployed this service within 2 weeks of telling Spare, go ahead, they've got a micro-training service. And so, but they were already trying to work on Spare to implement their paratransit scheduling software, so it was a very quick turn for them to deploy microtransit. But they have a similar size city to us. They have a similar size population to us. They have kind of the demographics are very, very similar. So I spent quite a bit of time on the phone with them, picking their brain about how they developed it, and how they deployed it, and some of the takeaways from the service that they've got there. They've been very happy with the service so far. So I would expect, and I've heard nothing but great things about Spare Labs and what the services that they'll do. They have an advanced algorithm that obviously all the trips will go through, and that's what we consider to be the quote-unquote dispatch point, and that's what would qualify to be a public transportation trip. It's all cloud-based, and so as long as we have internet, we will be able to access the platform and the rider as well. And then, again, the biggest thing that we can get out of this is the data collection that we're going to get out of it as we move forward into service development and service changes. So with that, that's a very quick, brief overview of that, and be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Mandrell, I must say the app is very easy to use. I've downloaded it and I'm putting in my key information right now, and so I'll be able to use it. But I know Ms. Patterson-Harris, I think, may have a comment, but prior to that, give us a little bit of an update on how you plan on presenting this. How are you going to get the market it? How are you going to get the word out?
So this meeting right here is a prime opportunity for us to get this out. So this is a really big key for us to have this discussion to get it out to the citizens. But the vendor, so Spare Labs, they have a very robust marketing plan that they have. They've given us all the assets. We're just have to go through and then begin putting it out there. They're going to be helping us every step of the way. So we're not trying to get too ahead of ourselves. We don't know exactly when Google Play is going to allow that app to be put in the store. So we would love to launch on Monday the 18th, but that's kind of up in the air with Google Play. So we're kind of in a weird spot here to where we're ready to launch. It's just going to be down to Google Play to get that out there so we can do that. So once we can kind of pinpoint that Google Play's either got that app ready to go, then we'll give ourselves a few days to really push us out through, press releases. I'll be happy to do a faux ride with folks if they want it at the news meeting and whatnot. So whatever we can to get this
Excellent.
out, we'll be pushing this as hard as we can.
Excellent. Ms. Patterson-Harris.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. He fixed it up for me because I was going to holler foul that there were discriminatory practices when they said it was available on Apple products.
Well, that's because you got that outdated technology.
He fixed it for me, so we're just waiting. And are we looking at the same type of search as you in the city bus on demand, just like on that other group of things as well? Okay.
The same app.
Okay. I didn't hear that, so I was getting a little bothered over here, given that I'm not an Apple girl. So.
Yeah, whichever store that you're in, Google Play or Apple will still be the same bus on demand.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson-Harris. Ms. Joy.
Mr. Mandrell, the plan that you've laid out for us today for the 7 to 7:30, Monday through Friday, how many vehicles do you anticipate operating during that period of time?
So We have 4 on-demand vehicles that we have in excess of our paratransit vehicles, and then typically we're running anywhere right now between 12 to 15 of our paratransit vehicles per day, and then we'll have at least 4 on the outside of that. So we're looking at somewhere between around 16-ish vehicles that we'll have deployed.
Okay, and clearly this is just an experiment at this point in time, but we need to keep in mind that we have shift workers, 8-hour shifts, 3 shifts a day, and we have a lot of people who work late. And so when you come back to us, will you give us that information about changing those hours and how flexible you guys can be? Because it really needs to be more than 7 to 7:30 Monday to Friday, to be honest with you. My other concern is, if you're doing this currently, what are you doing in terms of the virus? What precautions are you taking on these vehicles?
Yeah, so I think good question, 2 good questions. So to answer both of them, I wanted in the presentation, I just sort of wanted to talk about the microtransit in supporting our fixed route system. What we're also doing, we have the night road program that we currently operate, which is on demand, or not necessarily on demand, it's scheduled 24 hours in advance, and that runs as late as 11 p.m. So what we're doing is we're taking that service and we'll be running it through this platform. So including our night ride service, we'll be running this on demand from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m.
Okay, tell people what the night demand service is, so they'll hear all this together.
Absolutely. So the night ride service is a service that after our fixed routes end, there are some folks, like you mentioned, that are still at work. And the night ride service is to fill that gap for folks that are working past 7:45 on our fixed routes, come off the streets. If they consider that ride, and we'll pick them up and take them home. So this kind of service that we're deploying throughout the day is going to very much mimic what we do at night. It's just going to be that they can actually schedule that ride real time and not have to schedule that out in a trip 24 hours in advance. So if they're at work, they get off, they can schedule it within those hours, and we'll hopefully have a vehicle within 10 minutes of that.
Will you bring us some information on that night rider program so that we might make it on demand as well? Now, what are you doing about the virus?
Good question. So every night we have our service lane folks, and we've kind of beefed that up a little bit by a couple of individuals. And every night we have our service lane folks wiping down all the touch points, the main touch points in the vehicle, disinfecting. We also have a professional cleaning crew that comes in every Sunday, and they wipe down every one of our vehicles and disinfect it with an electrostatic sprayer. And they did do that every single Sunday since mid-March. They're continuing to do that. So our operators are equipped with hand sanitizers and that sort of thing. Right now we are fare free, and so we've put a bungee cord kind of 6 feet behind the operator, and we're doing rear boarding zone at this point, except for those that are ADA that need the ramp at the front, and they would board to the front. We are working through many of options to try to protect our operator. My goal is to begin taking fares again on June 1st. One of the kind of the quicker solution we've come to protect our operators to basically take a shower curtain essentially and safely secure that between the operator and then our fare box, so that the passenger can still come on, pay their fares, do what they need to do at the fare box, but there still be some sort of barrier between our operator and that passenger getting on. We've also capped out we're limiting the ridership on the buses, so we're not going to go anything over 15 on the bus. If we get to a point where we have 15, we're taking that bus basically out of service. And we're sending out, right now we have a couple of vans that we're kind of having on standby, and they will go pick up along the route any other passengers until that bus gets back below that 15 passenger threshold. So to help enhance the social distancing, we're also encouraging all of our passengers to wear face masks, and all of our employees, all of our drivers are wearing face masks each day.
So what's the capacity on these smaller vehicles?
So the capacity on these is 11 seated and 3 wheelchairs. We are capping this one out at 3 passengers per vehicle.
Okay, I look forward to seeing this, and hopefully we'll have better access for people, and maybe not so many big buses, maybe.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Griffith?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mandrell, thank you very much for your vision in getting this going so rapidly. I really, I'd like to say that from a city council standpoint. I'd also like to, I think I can speak for, as chairman of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which Mayor Pope and Councilman Patterson Harris and Mr. Atkinson serve on. This is fantastic and a leap that I think is very important for the future of mass transit. And thank you for getting on it this quickly. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Griffith. I think that concludes, Mr. Mandrell, thank you very much. Thanks for the update. We'll look forward to hearing more about the pilot project, City Bus on Demand. Nice. Okay, I believe that concludes our work session items. Let's quickly go over the pulls for tonight. I know that coming into the meeting, the only pull I had was item 619. Ms. Patterson Harris, I believe maybe you wanted to add a couple to that. Is that correct? All right, you ready to go there, Ms. Patterson? Yes, Ms. Patterson Harris.
Unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, from this point forward, you have total control as to when I talk. So,
You know, with somebody like you, that's a powerful thing, too.
I'm trying to wrap my brain around that.
I'm going to try to get better. I promise you I'm going to try to get better.
No, I would suggest that items, I believe it's 617, 618, in reference to information related to a public hearing that was held through Community Development Board regarding some funding and how to utilize those. I think it would be great that we pull those and kind of share that information if we're allowed to.
I think that'd be great. Mr. Atkinson, could you guys support that too? Council, you're okay with that last minute pull? Is that okay? Okay. So it'll be 617, 618, 619 will be our pulls. Okay. Council, I believe that takes care of our work session for tonight. This afternoon, we will hold executive session today for the purpose of consulting with city staff regarding pending or contemplated litigation or settlement agreements, and to hold consultation with attorneys under section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. Also, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property under section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code. It is 2:56, and the Lubbock City Council is recessed to executive session. Good afternoon. It is 4:33. I will call the Lubbock City Council to order. We are in regular session. Today is Tuesday, the 12th of May, 2020. Welcome to Citizens Tower for our very first meeting in our new City Hall. We'll start with our ceremonial items tonight. Well, as is our practice, we will begin with an invocation followed by the pledges. Tonight, Minister Sherry Patty with Vandalia Church of Christ will lead our prayer. Following that, the Mayor Pro Tem will lead us in the pledges to the American flag and the Texas flag. If you'll notice, the flags are to my far left. If you would please rise.
Let us pray. God of grace and glory, may we in unison quietly breathe in your abundant gifts and know that you hold all of life together. We know that we are fallible, and so we humbly come before you and ask for your great wisdom for our leaders everywhere, leaders in our churches, schools, businesses, hospitals, places of recreation, and government. Leaders all need insights, deep insights to be able to discern how to go forward today. God, grant them sound judgment so that they may know how to best serve the city of Lubbock. For we are all connected in you. We ask much courage for those who lead, so that they will be able to do difficult things, things that might be unpopular, but that have been determined, needing to be done at this time. God, inspire all of humanity to serve others well. Remove fear, prejudice, animosity from our hearts. Open our eyes and minds to reveal when we are being stubborn, close-minded, egotistical, or selfish, and replace those traits with justice, mercy, humility, and great courage. Give ears to all who work in these chambers to hear each person who speaks. May this Citizens Tower be a resource for our entire community, a place where residents receive a fair hearing. Give our representatives humble and pure hearts to know how to support others well and creatively. Help the city of Lubbock to invite all citizens into full participation economically, educationally, judiciously, and recreationally. Help us to be a shining star of unity in our community. God, lead Lubbock during this time to follow the ways of those who unselfishly gave opportunities to the weakest in society. Help us to encourage others to shine brightly. God, strengthen our hearts when we falter and draw us ever closer to you. We ask these things in all your holy names. Amen.
Minister Patty, we thank you so much for opening our meeting tonight with prayer. Thank you much. Mayor Pro Tem, you did a great job on the pledges too. I didn't know if that would make its move the 2.5 blocks this direction, but you seem to have made the move successfully with that. So we're all pleased by that. Okay, next on our agenda tonight is some special recognitions. We have a number of members of our boards and commissions that have recently been appointed. And we are going to recognize those at this time. And I'm going to call on Councilman Steve Massengale to lead those ceremonies. He's going to do this in a very safe way, I believe. Mr. Massengale, I'm going to need you to turn that microphone on so I can. Okay, you should be live.
We're hot. To tell everybody to be patient with us tonight. We're learning the new technology in this room, and it's been interesting to say the least. It's my honor to do the board recognitions tonight. The city of Lubbock has almost 50 boards and commissions that are filled with citizens because even during this crisis we've been in, many of these boards and commissions have continued to work because there's work to be done. And so we have some new members of these boards. I'll call you up, recognize you. I'll hand you the certificate. We'll continue to maintain our social distance. And then who's taking photos tonight? So I'll recognize.
Lisa is.
Okay. And do we want to take photos all at the end or one at a time here? Let's do one at a time. So we'll take a photo right here, and then we'll go on to the next recognition. So this time I'd like to call upon Henry Tarango. Henry has agreed to serve on the Junk Vehicle Compliance Board. And I'll read this certificate we're going to present to you, Henry. Greetings, the members of the City Council reposing special trust in the integrity of Henry Tarango, hereby appoint him to the Junk Vehicle Compliance Board to act within the jurisdiction and authority prescribed by the City of Lubbock in such capacity. It's dated today and signed by the mayor and the Lubbock City Council. Our next recognition this evening is Mr. Jeff Lansdale. Come on up, Jeff. Thank you for agreeing to serve on the Parks and Recreation Board. And your certificate also says, greetings, the members of the City Council reposing special trust in the integrity of Jeff Lansdale, hereby appoint you to the Parks and Recreation Board to act within the jurisdiction and authority prescribed by the City of Lubbock in such capacity. It's dated today, May 12, 2020, and signed by the mayor and all members of the Lubbock City Council. Our next recognition this evening is Jason Potter. Jason has agreed to serve on the Public Transit Advisory Board. And your certificate also reads, greetings, the members of the Lubbock City Council reposing special trust in the integrity of Jason Potter, hereby appoint you to the Public Transit Advisory Board to act within the jurisdiction and authority prescribed by the City of Lubbock in such capacity. It's dated today, the 12th day of May, 2020, signed by the mayor and all members of the Lubbock City Council. Thank you very much. Next up are two members appointed to our Veterans Advisory Commission. Would James Keel and Craig Ward please come up? That works. Good job, gentlemen. Both your certificates read, greetings, the members of the City Council reposing special trust in the integrity of James Keel and Craig Ward, hereby appointed to the Veterans Advisory Committee to act within the jurisdiction and authority prescribed by the City of Lubbock in such capacity. It's dated the 12th day of May, 2020, signed by the mayor and all the members of the Lubbock City Council. So, James, thank you for your service. Craig, thank you very much. Our last recognition this evening is citizens agreeing to serve on the Water Board of Appeals. And would Jason Bland and Anthony Presley please come forward? Well, Anthony's not here, it's just Jason. Hi, Jason. Thanks for agreeing to serve. Greetings, the members of the City Council reposing special trust in the integrity of Jason Bland, hereby appoint you to the Water Board of Appeals to act within the jurisdiction and authority prescribed by the City of Lubbock in such capacity. It's confirmed this 12th day of May, 2020. Signed by the mayor and all the members of the Lubbock City Council. Thank you very much. Good job, everybody. Everybody did good social distancing on that.
Thank you, Mr. Massengale. I would like to echo Mr. Massengale's comments. Mr. Bland, Mr. Ward, Mr. Keel, Mr. Potter, Mr. Lansdale, Mr. Tarango, thank you for your willingness to serve. We truly could not do it without you. And very much of the heavy lifting that goes on happens on our boards and commissions. And so we're thankful that you're here. It looks like some of you brought your families along with you, which is very good. We will not start our regular meeting until 5 p.m. We've promised citizens that we will not do that until that point. And at that point, we will begin with citizen comments. So we're going to take a quick recess. The council, I'd like all of you and senior staff to gather in front. I'd like to take a picture to commemorate our first meeting at Citizens Tower. And as well as staff, if you'd like to take some pictures too, Alicia's going to be here to snap some photos. And then we will gavel back in for our regular meeting at 5 p.m. Thank you. Lubbock City Council is in recess. Good evening, it's 5:01. I'll call the Lubbock City Council to order for our regular scheduled meeting. Today is Tuesday, the 12th of May, 2020. The first item on our agenda is citizen comments. According to our council rules, according to our council rules, the, I've got a lot of technology I'm trying to keep up with. Okay. Any citizen that would like to speak before our council needs to sign up no later than 5 p.m., the beginning of our meeting. They sign up with a form like I'm holding here, and they have 3 minutes to make comments about something that's on our agenda. We have two citizens that have asked to speak tonight, and so I'll start with Mr. Scott Stevenson. Scott is here to speak on agenda item 1.1. Mr. Stevenson, please come forward. Mr. Stevenson, we're going to be keeping time out here. I believe you'll get a 30-second warning when you have. Okay. You've been here before. Let me turn your microphone on. Bear with me 1 second. Okay.
Okay, well, my agenda item is 1.1, which you had an executive session, is coronavirus impact and financial impact. Well, we're all affected. This afternoon, I got my bill for permits. So my food permit and smoking permit and bar permit. And I was just going to ask that you consider the coronavirus impact for all of us, because since we've been closed, I've spent at Jake's about $70,000 in taxes and utilities and rent and payroll. And now we're trying to get open, and we hope to open next week. We're still trying to find out if we will be. And then my permits are due next week. So if I don't pay them, then there's late fees. So if there's not any possibly there might be some consideration to extend the permits, or at least give us an extension on the late fees, because we're already in a real negative position. That's all I had. And you guys got a nice new place, and it's good to see everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. We will reply back to you. It's not appropriate for us to have that discussion right now, but we'll get back to you. Thank you very much for coming, and we want to get you open just like you want to be open. Our second and final speaker here this evening to speak on item 7.7 is Michael Poster. Mr. Poster, do you want to speak now, or would you prefer to speak at the public hearing? Okay, we'll reserve your right to speak at the public hearing then, okay? Okay. We'll move to our next item on our agenda. It's minutes. It's item 5. It's on the minutes of our April 14th, 2020 regular City Council meeting and April 22nd, 2020 special City Council meeting were included in our agenda for tonight's meeting. Council, to begin discussion, is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Titus. Is there a second? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Council, are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a second to approve the minutes as presented. All council members in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by the same sign? The motion carries 7-0. We'll move now to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins with item 6.1. It's on page, that's on page 27. Consent agenda, the consent agenda is comprised of items considered to be routine and enacted by one motion without separate discussion. If the council desires to discuss an item, that item is removed from the consent agenda and is considered separately. Tonight, we're going to consider items 6.17, 6.18, and 6.19 separately. Council, is that correct? Yes. Okay. Council, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda except for items 6.17, 6.18, and 6.19? Move to approve. Thank you, Ms. Joy. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Griffith. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, save items 6.17, 6.18, and 6.19, please say aye. Aye. Opposed by that same sign. The motion carries 7-0. Let's go to item 6.17. Ms. Patterson Harris, are you okay with us considering 6.17 and 6.18 together? One time, Ms. Patterson. Oh, I turned you off. Are you okay with us considering those two together?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Can I take? Will you offer me a motion on those two items, please?
So move.
Got a motion to approve items 6.17 and 6.18. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Chattis, thank you very much. Mr. Atkinson.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Karen Murphy will come up. Ms. Karen Murphy will come up and walk us through. This really represents us trying to work from your new Community Development Services Board. If you'll recall, those were reconstituted to meet some state guidelines. They've had their first public hearing for meeting. Ms. Murphy will explain to us.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Good evening, Ms. Murphy.
Good evening. I'm going to jump right into why we're here tonight for the two items that we're looking at. In response to the coronavirus or COVID-19 outbreak, HUD allowed for an accelerated process for the allocation and use of federal grant funds received under the CARES Act. We had funding will be provided to support direct services to at-risk populations, including low to income, moderate income individuals, and also those are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, and those directly impacted by the pandemic. We have received an allocation so far of the Community Development Block Grant, COVID-19, of $1,242,859. And then also in our Emergency Solution Grant for COVID is $632,362. Also, since we're combining these, we also were able to use existing home investment partnership funding of, we've allocated $2,038,000. This is existing funding, so we're not having to wait on contracts because it's not new funding, it's existing, we've already appropriated, so it's a reallocation of funding. We amended our 2019-2023 consolidated plan due to the fact that our 2019 action plan is attached to that. When we do our first year of a consolidated plan, our action plan is attached to that. So we really only had to do our action plans. Our action plan is to say what we're going to spend in this year. So we had to amend the consolidated plan as well as the action plan. Also, our citizen participation plan was amended to address the COVID-19 waivers from HUD. That waiver included a 5-day public comment period. So we were able to that was the part of the acceleration. We have already had that 5-day comment period, and then we also had our public hearing at our virtual Community Development and Services Board meeting last week. That is what's before you tonight is to agree to those recommendations from that board. We took full advantage of the waivers. We are, as Mr. Atkinson alluded to this afternoon, we are still receiving guidance from HUD. This is a fast track, but we're still trying. We are able to do this ahead of time and be able to be ready as soon as the funding is, or the contracts are to us. With that being said, we have to have the approval of all these amendments from HUD, and then that's when they'll send it to congressional approval, and that's when we'll get our contract, where we'll actually have the funding, the COVID funding in our account to start expending. With the home dollars, however, they're already in our account. So we're going to be able to implement a emergency rental assistance, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. We've already, the contract that's also before you tonight, the resolution is with Lutheran Social Services. And the reason for that is they have the capacity of already going through with utility assistance. So they're able to process a lot of payments to several vendors, not just P&L, but other vendors that supply energy. So also, just a unique thing is the CD staff will be doing all the intake for the rental assistance. That way we can streamline that, keep up with the data. We'll also be able to keep up with who's been assisted and who has not. If we distributed that out to multiple agencies to do that intake, we felt that we would lose control of being able to assist everyone. And a new thing about this is under home, we're reallocating funding, but we also had to reprogram the funding to use as tenant-based rental assistance, and that is a program under home funding. But we're just using one component of that, and that is emergency rental assistance. HUD recognized it was going to take a little while to get that CARES funding out for us to expend, so they at least wanted us to be able to use, if we did have any cities had home funding available, then we could utilize that immediately.
Okay, and that describes both items 670 and 618, is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Ms. Patterson-Harris, would you like to add to this, please, ma'am?
Yes, I thought it was just important that we reiterate that this evening, given the fact that we had under the new guidelines, if you will, for the Community Development Board. We did have first meeting to make this, have this action take place. I think it's important to recognize that we're not waiting on the funds to come down. We're utilizing what we have so we can assist so many citizens who are impacted by COVID-19 in their workplaces so that they don't become homeless, in addition to helping the homeless program. So I just thought we wanted to make sure that we highlighted that this evening to make sure the citizens know what we have going and that we've not forgotten them, and we have kind of taken a step forward in utilizing what we have.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson Harris. Ms. Joy?
Ms. Murphy, how do people access the emergency funds? What do they need to do if they're sitting, listening, or hear about this tomorrow? What do they do?
We will send out on our Facebook media page, and we'll also be getting out, it'll be a phone number. We're going to try to do as much as online applications as we can, because we are still not accepting clients in our department. We don't want to do face-to-face, so we have a process already in place that we've been doing that with utility assistants. So that way, we'll be putting out a phone number, an email, and also, like I said, we'll have, we don't have all the staff lined out of how that's going to roll over on telephone yet, but we will start accepting those probably next Monday. So we'll get it all out.
You mentioned homeless. How are you assisting a homeless person currently?
We are still spending our funding at this time, with our regular 2019-2020 funding for ESG, but we also will look at, if someone comes to us that needs rental assistance, we'll be able to house them. We'll also go to our providers that have rapid rehousing funding, but they'll also be rapid rehoused too.
Are you able to work with Grace Campus on
Yes,
some of this?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Mr. Chavez?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Murphy, thank you for what you're doing out there, helping the community.
Thank you, sir.
The efforts that you're making, how are we reaching out to the non-Spanish speaking or non-English speaking community?
We already have our guidelines in Spanish, and we'll be reaching out to those. I'd like to give a good component of this. The checks that will be written will be to the landlords. So we'll be in contact with tenants and landlords. So it's going to be legal service will be the ultimate writing the check to the landlord. So any landlords also, we will ask those landlords if they have anyone. We're also going to go to tax credits and those kind of things. So we will be posting information in English and Spanish.
Okay, you mentioned, or I don't know if I understood it correctly, you'll be helping with utilities as well?
Yes, sir. So if with the home dollars, it's 80% medium income. With CAP dollars, Legal Social Services does now with utility assistance, it's a poverty level. So if someone does not meet that poverty level, we're going to try to layer those assistance. So if they need utility assistance and they are at the poverty level, then we'll utilize the CAP funding. If not, then we'll be able to use the home dollars.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chavez. Anything else from Ms. Murphy? Okay, thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, council, we've got a motion on the floor to approve items 617 and 618. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by that same sign? That motion carries 7-0. Let's move now to item 619. 619 is on page 224. To begin, Mr. Atkinson, do you have any comments on this?
Mr. Mayor, we'll turn it over to Ms. Kelly Campbell, our Director of Aviation.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Good evening, Ms. Campbell.
Good evening. Thank you. As you guys all are well aware, the COVID-19 pandemic hit aviation and travel particularly hard. And in the early days, the requests for financial assistance from our business partners, our tenants, came by the dozens. They came relentlessly. They came immediately. Having a little bit of time in these last few weeks, I think, find the bottom. I think we hit the bottom with, a 95% reduction in traffic, and assess our financial situation, having some time for legislation to work, knowing what our award is from the CARES Act. We feel like we're in a good position to lend assistance to our partners. These relationships are important today, and they'll be important in the future. We need these businesses to be healthy. The aviation community is very symbiotic in nature. We need it for services. We need to make sure those services are provided to our customers, to our passengers, to the community in the region. The resolution today, is authorizing a deferred collection for up to 90 days of rents, fees, charges, minimum annual guarantees to business and tenants operating at the airport upon the request. It also lays out a payment plan beginning in July through December, with those installments in 1/6 payments. But this is equally impactful to us. We do find ourselves in a good situation. We've got a healthy reserve balance of over $10 million, cash on hand at about $25 million. And the CARES Act funding is about $9.5 million, which would fund our operating expenses for up to about a year. So we're not out of the woods. It'll be a long, slow climb out, but we are in a position to lend assistance and help with some liquidity issues, and that's a recommendation before you today.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Any questions regarding item 619? So, Ms. Campbell, just run through who the different those partners are that would qualify, maybe it's generally the partners that would qualify for these short-term concessions.
It is not limited in this resolution, other than to say it's been by request, but those who have requested have been all Six airlines, so Southwest America, United, FedEx, and UPS. The parent companies of all 5 rental car agencies operating at the airport: Avis, Enterprise, Alamo, Hertz, National, Fixed Base Operator, Lavacaro, ABM, the Skygap, Clear Channel, or advertising agency. I'm probably forgetting someone. I'm sorry.
Maybe
The parking's a management agreement, so that one will continue to collect all revenue on parking. We'll continue to collect revenue from our federal agreements, TSA and FAA, so we won't be without any revenue,
Right.
but it is most everyone.
Ms. Joy?
Ms. Campbell, just to be clear, it is deferred for 90 days, and then it's payable after that within 6 months.
Yes,
In
ma'am.
other words, they could do it every month, or they could pay it all. I do think and believe that in addition to this, agreement, the airlines are receiving PPP funds, are they not? Or some funds?
I can discuss the airport side of the CARES Act very well. On the airlines, I'm as well versed. They did receive assistance, some in loan guarantees and some in actual grants for the airlines. And I think that's completely out of the woods. Some of them are in better financial standing than others. The other parts of the aviation ecosystem, if you will, were not included. So all of the concessions were completely left out of the CARES Act. So food and beverage, restaurant concessionaires, rental cars. Now some of our businesses have received small business assistance, and so some just may not apply to them. They may have, in accepting that assistance, may not be able to accept this, or they may only be able to accept portions of it, but it will be available to them.
But you recommend that we approve this agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
I believe did your airport board consider this also?
Yes, sir.
And they recommend it to us also?
Approved unanimously, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Ms. Campbell? Thank you, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you.
Council, we got a motion and a second on the floor for, on item, we did a motion, excuse me. Okay, to begin, thank you, Mr. Meskill. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Now we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by that same sign? Motion carries 7-0. That concludes our, pardon me, that concludes the consent agenda. We'll move now to our regular agenda, begins with item 7.1. Item 7.1 is on page 346. Item 7.1 is a resolution from the council to consider continuing and affirming the mayor's declaration of disaster regarding the COVID-19 coronavirus epidemic. In order to begin discussion, is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Massengill. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Mr. Atkinson?
Excuse me, Mayor, I'll start in on this now. We've asked city attorney and his staff to just verify one of the citations. Last Friday, Governor Abbott, or actually last Thursday evening, Governor Abbott issued an update to his most recent executive order, which defined how businesses would reopen in Texas, when and where. And in part of that, it also changed certain functions related to the enforcement clauses. Friday at noon, Mayor Pope issued his 9th declaration of disaster, which adopted the language that was contained in that most recent order by Governor Abbott. The mayor's order, per statute, is allowed to live only through tomorrow. The item before the council is to consider affirming and continuing the mayor's declaration. This is what we have done in all the prior issuances from the mayor as well. Draw your attention to the first page. Council, you should each have this at your place. This will adopt the mayor's 9th declaration. This is number 1. This modifies the language. Originally, we had the Lubbock Safe program attached as an exhibit. Your 9th declaration, or the mayor's 9th declaration, rather adopts Lubbock Safe by reference. It calls out the web address where those guidelines are posted. This is done to accommodate the ongoing work of the Lubbock Economic Recovery Task Force as they update and add new categories of business as those new categories of businesses are allowed to reopen. So it keeps you from coming back to continue to amend and to attach. Beyond that, it just continues this through May the 26th, which being the date of your next regularly scheduled city council meeting. Any questions, I'd be pleased to answer. And they have verified the numbers are correct, so no issues with the document before you.
Mr. Atkinson, should the citation reference the webpage address for Lubbock Safe, or is it okay just to call it out as it is?
Your declaration, Mayor, has the web address listed in detail.
Thank you. I'm sorry, that's right. It's much more, it's lengthier than this.
Yes, sir.
Now. Okay. Other questions, comments on item 7.1? Okay, thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Council, we've got got a motion and a second for item 7.1. All those in favor of them, please say aye. Aye. Opposed by that same sign? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, Council, we'll move now to item 7.2. 7.2 is a public hearing, and I probably should have, before we get started, let's, Council, if you would make a note on your agenda that item 7.10, I believe, let me confirm. 7.10 has been taken off by the proponent. Is that correct, Mr. That's correct, right?
Correct. The applicant is withdrawn.
Okay, thank you. So we will not be considering 7.10. Items 7.2 through 7.13 are public hearings, first reads of public hearings from planning, with the exception of 7.10 having been taken off. I know that we want to handle 7.11 separately when we get there to that one. Council, if it pleases you, we'll get a briefing from staff on all of these, and then we can just decide how you want to handle the public hearings. Is that okay? Everybody okay with that? Okay. All right. So item 7.2 is on page 347, and Mr. Brian Isom is here from our Director of Planning is here to take us through that. Mr. Isom, let me get you on here. I've got the microphone on, and you should have your screen. Okay, please, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Isom, Planning Department. Item 7.2 is case 390A for Troy McCrummen, represented here by Chase Marbury. The request is to rezone property from two-family District R2 to local retail District C2 at 3532 34th Street. 25 notifications were sent out to the public, and we received none in opposition or in support. Here we show the subject site outlined in orange. It's generally located north of 34th Street and east of Knoxville Avenue. As you can see here, the majority of development along 34th Street is commercial in nature, with single family to the north and to the south. The existing zoning on site again is R2. The future land use map calls for commercial within this area along the 34th Street corridor. The site photos again show the commercial development, including the existing site. The application itself is in compliance with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan as it calls for commercial development in this area, and rezoning could assist in the revitalization of a commercial site. The request is also consistent with the present and expected development patterns and has adequate access and public infrastructure. And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this request by unanimous vote.
Council, any questions for Mr. Isom on 7.2? Okay, let's move to item 7.3. It's on page 359.
Item 7.3 is case 2816E for Tigris LLC for the 84th Street Partners LLC. The request is to rezone property from Garden Office GO to single-family District R1 as specific use for townhomes at 1810 82nd Street. 31 notifications were sent out, and we received 1 in favor and 2 received opposition. Here we show the location of the support and opposition within the notification boundaries. The opposition, one letter stated that they basically didn't want two-story construction at that location, but could be supportive of one-story construction. Here we show the subject site outlined in orange, generally located north of 82nd Street and east of Avenue S. The vacant property to the east is owned by the city developer, and if this zoning is approved, they would attempt to combine the properties and develop all as one project. Again, the existing zoning on site is garden office. The future land use map does call for low-density residential along this portion of 82nd Street. The site photos show the undeveloped nature of the existing site as well as some of the adjacent residential uses. And the applicant did supply us with a proposed site plan if the zoning is approved. This application is in compliance with the future land use map and comprehensive plan as it calls for low-density residential uses in this area, which are allowed within this approval. The request is also consistent with the present and expected development in the area and adequate access and public infrastructure. And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this request by unanimous vote. Staff is available for questions.
Questions for Mr. Isom? Mr. Isom, isn't it accurate to say that there's some apartments just
to the east?
Just to the east, that's right, just maybe a little bit north and to the east, is that correct?
Yes, there's some just to the east of this.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Ms. Patterson Harris?
Yes, sir. I actually had my buzzer on for the previous item.
You can go back and talk about it too, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I just had my question is, so is it that all of those places on that block are actually zoned differently than what they actually are?
They are. They were all developed as commercial zoning, or commercial developments. However, they are zoned two-family district R2. So he's attempting to clean that up so that no future tenants would have an issue.
So we're gonna start seeing a lot of folks come to us and basically request funding?
Potentially.
Are we recommending that they do that, or how are we handling that?
We can discuss
Since
it
we know that it's an
internally.
issue.
We started to notice this issue with this case, that there's a whole section of 34th Street that is not zoned appropriately for development that exists. So it's something that we can discuss.
So we've reached out to the other.
Not to the adjacent property owners, not yet, no.
Okay, I just thought it might be a good idea, because, I mean, it applies to everything along that
Definitely.
strip. And with regard to the next, item 7.3, the plan for that, it maybe is something I should ask the applicant, but.
Ms. Patterson Harris, move that microphone a little closer to you. Rarely do you need more microphone, but I
Well,
think you might hear.
they gave me this training session earlier that I did need to get close to it, and I've tried to adjust myself. We're gonna work through it. That's actually District 2. The item in 7.3, and I've been really anxiously awaiting something to happen there. So the plan there is for townhomes, am I reading that correctly?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson Harris. Anything else on 7.3? Okay, Mr. Isom, please continue. 7.4 is on page 377, Council.
Item 7.4 is a case 2861 for Hugh Reed Associates. The request is for a specific use for a veterinary hospital or clinic in General Retail District C2 at 3515 4th Street. 5 notifications were sent out, none were received in support or in opposition. Here we show the subject site outlined in blue. It's generally located south of 4th Street and west of Milwaukee Avenue. It's a vacant out parcel that is part of a larger piece of, and I misspoke, it's actually zoned C3 zone property. Again, the existing zoning on site is C3. The future land use map does call for commercial at this portion of the intersection of 4th and Milwaukee. The site photos again show the vacant property along with some of the commercial developments adjacent to it. Here we have the proposed site plan for the veterinary clinic with one access onto Milwaukee and a shared access easement with the development to the north. The application is in compliance with the future land use map and comprehensive plan as it calls for commercial uses in this area. The request is also consistent with present and expected development in the area and has adequate access to public infrastructure. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this case by unanimous vote. Staff is available for questions.
Questions for Mr. Isom on 7.4? Okay, Mr. Isom, let's move to 7.5. It's page 381.
Item 7.5 is case 28950 for Ron Wallace and BO LLC. The request is to rezone property from Garden Office GO and High Density Apartments A2 to General Retail District C3 at 6303 and 6305 82nd Street. Staff sent out 13 notifications and will only receive 1 in support of the project. Here we show the location of that property that was in support of the rezone. Here we show subject site outlined in orange, generally located south of 82nd Street and east of Milwaukee Avenue. This is the current location of the Beaton Bow Corp offices. and is surrounded by a broad mix of commercial uses. This rezoning is a bit of a cleanup, as the majority of this area was rezoned in 2005. This small piece of garden office in A2 was not included in the additional area. The future land use map is for commercial along this portion of the 82nd Street corridor. And our photos show the existing commercial developments on both sides of 82nd Street. The application is in compliance with the future land use map and comprehensive plan, as it calls for commercial development in this area. The request is also consistent with the present and expected development within the local area and has adequate access and public infrastructure. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this case by unanimous vote. Staff is available for questions.
Questions for staff on item 7.5? Okay, let's move to item 7.6. It's on page 408.
Item 7.6 is case 2921D for Ubiquity Development LLC, represented tonight by Hugo Reed and Associates. The request is to rezone property from Commercial District C4 to Two-Family District R2 and Apartment Medical AM at 4816 114th Street, 114th Street, and 4925, 4937, 4939, 4941, 4943, and 4945 110th. Staff sent out 8 notifications, and we received none in support or in opposition. Here we show the subject site outlined in orange. It's generally located south of 110th Street and east of Slide Road. This portion of the rezoning is part of a larger project that was rezoned in 2018. This piece was part of a nursery development that was still existing at the time, so it didn't go through the rezoning process, and now we're cleaning that piece up. Again, the existing zoning outside is C4 Commercial District, and the future land use map calls for mixed-use development within this area. These next 2 slides show the current state of development for the project. They're doing some land work and some utility work within the area. And these 2 slides will show you the portions that are being rezoned. This portion in red being rezoned to the Apartment Medical District. This portion green to match adjacent property to be zoned R2. The application itself is in compliance with the future land use map and comprehensive plan, as it calls for mixed-use development within this area. The request is also consistent with the present and expected development in the area and has adequate access and public infrastructure. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this by a vote of 6-0 with one abstention. Staff is available for any questions.
Questions on 7.6? All right, please continue, Mr. Isom. 7.7 is on page 423.
Item 7.7 is case 2952C for affordable storage, represented tonight by Hugo Reed and Associates. The request is for a specific use for self-storage facility. We sent out 40 notifications and received 2 in favor and 1 in opposition. Here we show the location of the support and the opposition. The support was in favor of the project due to having access to this type of facility close to home. I believe at the public hearing for P&Z, he said his garage was getting really full, needed a place to store some things. The opposition had some questions regarding the location of the screening wall that would be adjacent to their alley and some of the lighting and security. Again, here we show the subject site in orange. As you can see, the majority of this hard corner at Side and Erskine is undeveloped, with the exception of the CVS at the hard corner, and they are surrounded by the North Point subdivision to the north and to the east. The existing zoning on site, again, is C3, which allows for the self-storage facility with the specific use approval. And our shared land use map calls for commercial development within this area. Our site photos show the vacant property at the hard corner, as well as some of the vacant property to the south and some of the residential development beyond. And here the applicant has provided us with a site plan of the proposal. You'll notice the green shaded area on the site plan that is actually adjacent to Erskine, so it just needs to be flipped. The application is in compliance with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, as it does call for commercial development in this area, as long as it follows the guidelines that are set in stone or set in place for the specific use section of our code. The request is also consistent with the present and expected development in the area and has adequate access and public infrastructure. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this case by unanimous vote. Available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Isom. Any questions on item 7.7? Ms. Joy.
I noted there was 1 opposition, 2 in favor. This has been a difficult piece of property out there. CVS is on the corner, has been for a long time. And so the vacant property, because it's not developed, has turned into very downtown. Lots of dirt, blowing dirt. I worried about it because it does back up to strictly single-family residences. It also, I guess the north side of it would be across the alley from some others. However, it does appear that there's been some discussion about the lighting and would it shine into the yards, that sort of thing. I assume they're going to address that later. But we kind of we have mixed. We have some who think it would be a good idea and one who's concerned, but I think his concern was primarily lighting. Was that what you understood from it?
Lighting, and then I know the lot to the east, they were worried about the location, the screen wall along their portion of the alley, whether it would be right against the concrete, how far back it would be. I know Terry spoke to it at the PD Commission, and I think he probably.
What did you all tell them?
The applicant spoke to it, and I believe he told them that I can't remember the exact distance, but there's some distance off the concrete's in the middle right away, doesn't take up the entire alley right away, but I believe he has there.
And is that a concrete alley? Do you know?
We'll get to hear from the proponent
I believe it is.
Looks like it is.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anything else on 7.7? Okay, let's go to 7.8 on page 442.
Item 7.8 is case 2160A for Mighty Wash. The request is to rezone property from Garden Office GO to General Retail District C3 to expand the existing car wash to the east at 2509 80th Street. 21 notifications were sent out and we received 1 in support and 4 in opposition. This map does show the support and opposition. You'll note that there's only 3 properties highlighted in opposition because 2 letters came from the same property address. The existing zoning, here we show the subject site outlined in orange. Again, the car wash directly to the east is planning on purchasing this property, demoing it, and expanding its facility back towards the neighborhood. The existing zoning, again, is garden office. And the future land use map does call for low-density residential within this area. The 2 top photos show the existing lot and a car wash development to the west. And then the bottom 2 photos show a residential development adjacent to the subject site. While the future land use map does call for low-density residential in this area, the request is to extend an existing zoning district and land use to the west. And it's currently being utilized for commercial development. The existing lot is currently being utilized for commercial development. This request is also consistent with the present and expected development in the area and has adequate access and public infrastructure. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this request by a vote of 6-0 with 1 abstention. Staff is available for questions.
Okay, any questions on item 7.8? Okay, let's move to item 7.9. It's on page 460.
Item 7.9 is case 3054C for Derry Bumpus, represented by Chester Carthel. The request is to rezone property from Interstate Highway Commercial IHC to light manufacturing M1 at 12102 Geneva Avenue. 10 notifications were sent out and we received none in opposition or in support. Here we show the subject site outlined in orange, generally located north of 122nd Street and east of Indiana. Over the years, the surrounding area has developed into a sort of medium-scale commercial service development. Again, the existing zoning on site is Interstate Highway Commercial, with a future land use map calling for commercial development within this area. The next 2 pages are some site photos that show the existing vacant lot as well as the commercial service uses that have developed within this area. The applicant has supplied staff with a site plan. The proposed use is for an office warehouse development, which will typically suit a trade professional that's able to store their vehicles inside, have a small office. Some of their work is done inside the building, some done in the open portion of the development. So the request is not in compliance with the future land use map. However, it is consistent with the existing development in the immediate area, as well as some of the expected changes proposed with the Unified Development Code. This proposal is in compliance with the principles outlined in a comprehensive plan pertaining to non-residential infill on the land use compatibility matrix. The request is also consistent with present and expected development in the area and has adequate access and public infrastructure. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this request by unanimous vote. The staff is available for questions.
Questions on 7.9, council? Okay, let's skip to 7. 711, please, it's on page 493.
Item 711 is case 4302A for VJ Murgai. The request is to rezone property from single-family District R1 to apartment medical AM at 3602 24th Street. We sent out 26 notifications and we received none in support and 2 letters in opposition. Here we show the location of the properties that were in opposition to the case. The opposition feels that the change in the AM district could devalue the property in their area, as well as jeopardize the integrity of the existing neighborhood. Here we show the subject site outlined in orange. As you can see, majority of development from 23rd Street south in this area appears to be single family in nature, with the exception of the medical facility at the northeast corner of 24th and Louisville. The majority of development north of 23rd Street appears to be more geared towards medical offices. Again, the existing zoning on site is R1, with the future land map calling for low density residential within this area. The site photo shows the lot in its current use, as well as the existing family neighborhood that surrounds it on the 3 remaining pictures to the east, the west, and to the north. The application is not in compliance with the future land use map. However, it is consistent with its components and principles. The request is also consistent with the present and expected development in the area, as this is within the apartment medical policy district, and it also has adequate access and public infrastructure. The Planning and Zoning Commission is recommending approval of this request by unanimous vote. Staff is available for questions.
Questions on 711? Let's move to 712, it's on page 509.
Item 12 is case 3408 for 806 Land Group, represented by A&D Engineering. The request is to rezone property from single-family District R1 to 2-family District R2 at 802 Upland Avenue. We sent out 12 notifications and received none in support or in opposition. There was, however, an individual that spoke at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. He indicated that he would rather have single-family homes developed at this location rather than duplexes. Here we show the subject site outlined in orange. Currently uses farmland with some adjacent residential development to the north and to the east, as well as Terra Vista Middle School across Upland. The existing zoning on site again is R1, with the future land use map calling for low-density residential in this area. Site photos show that the sparse development in the area, with farmland and residential uses in the top 2 photos, and the middle school in the bottom 2. While the application is not consistent with future land use map, it is consistent with its components, as the request does allow for a mix of single-family uses, being townhomes, duplexes, and single-family detached projects. It also is in compliance with the overall comprehensive plan, and the request is consistent with the present and expected development in the area and has adequate access and public infrastructure. Planning and Zoning Commission is recommending approval of this project by a vote of 6-0 with 1 abstention. Staff is available for questions.
Questions on item 712? Okay, let's move to item 713, it's on page 523.
Item 713 is case 3409 for Ryan Burton. The request is to rezone property from Garden Office GO to apartment medical AM at 8417 Milwaukee Avenue. 21 notifications were sent out. 2 were received in favor and none were received in opposition. Here we show the subject site outlined in orange, with existing property, proposed garden office developments to the north and the south, and residential developments to the east and west. We have the support map. Oddly enough, the median on 89th Street is showing support, so whatever property owner was notified with that, they sent in their support as well. Here we show the existing zoning on site as garden office, and the future land use map calls for office development along this portion of Milwaukee Avenue corridor. Site photos show the existing building, as well as some of the surrounding garden office developments and the existing residential to the west. The application is in compliance with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, as it calls for commercial in this area and office. And this request is actually for a daycare center within that complex. The request is also consistent with present and expected development in the area and has adequate access and public infrastructure. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this request by unanimous vote. Staff is available for questions.
Okay, any questions on 713 for Mr. Isom? Okay, you did that quite well, Brian. Thank you very much. I'm sure we may call you back. Don't get too comfortable sitting down. Anyone opposed to opening the public hearing for all these at the same time? do the public hearing, then we can consider, decide how we'd like to consider them? Mr. Joy, you agree with that? Okay. Mr. Chavez?
One being considered separately.
Okay, got that. I'm with you on that. Okay. You're okay with doing the public hearing though at the same time? Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and open the public hearing for all of our first read planning items tonight. So those are items 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, 7.8, 7.11, 7.12, and 7.13. Did I miss 7.9? And 7.9. Thank you, Mr. Weaver and Mr. Satterwhite. Let's do that again. Items 7.2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13. All right. We'll open the public hearing. We'll ask those that would like to speak in opposition to any of these items to please come forward. Anybody in opposition to any of these zoning cases, please come forward and speak to the council. Okay, how about any proponents, anybody in favor of any of these items, please come forward. Good evening, Mr. Holman. Mr. Holman, how many years did you make comments at City Hall on 13th Street?
Many years.
Yeah,
And
many is a good answer, I think.
More than one. I was going to tell you, first off, to you and your staff, congratulations on your new home. It's a very nice facility. I did chuckle a bit. I wanted so often to bring a gag gift because there was a long period of time before you got the new computer set up over there that those of us speaking at the podium had to swing around and get the laser light, and for those of us, it was just as awkward as can be. And I thought about bringing some glasses with some mirrors on it, and I thought that would be a neat trick. But no, this is great. This is congratulations for sure. I have 3 zone cases this evening. I'd like to maybe run through these quickly and maybe address the questions that Ms. Luttrell brought up on one of them. The first one I have is 7.4. It's for Shockey Real Estate. It's our veterinary clinic at effectively 4th and Milwaukee. In my view, it's a fairly straightforward case. I don't think we got any response one way or the other. The way the code is written, for us to be able to do a veterinary clinic, we have to get the specific use, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on that. Next up at bat for me is item 7.6. This is our somewhat cleanup case for Ubiquity Development. The way the prior zoning and the way the land transactions came down, the developer decided not to lose the C4 zoning on the sort of the back couple of 100 feet of that Sparkman tract initially. We then moved on with our development plans, and I think we all kind of forgot that we left that C4 in place, and so we're here asking you to help us clean that up. So I think that was also fairly self-explanatory. Lastly, item 7.7, and Mr. Poster's here this evening as well, on our affordable storage. Ms. Joy, yes, there was a person that spoke planning and zoning that was immediately to the east of us on the other side of the alley. Yes, they did ask about, where the fence would be. What the code allows us to do, it allows us to put a solid rear wall of a storage building on the right-of-way line, so long as there's no penetrations and it's masonry. So it would be either the solid wall of that building, or if it were regular commercial zoning, it would be fence. So pick whichever one you want. But to answer your question, it goes on the alley right-of-way line, which is 5 feet off of the edge of the concrete. That concrete alley paving is 10 foot wide, centered up in a 20-foot alley. Mr. Poster can speak much more intelligently about the lighting than I can, but I do understand that it's all low-level lighting, wall packs, and those types of things inside the facility itself. So we found that these, when built as well as Mr. Poster does, I think they fit very well into the neighborhood. With that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions or offer anything else you might need.
Thank you, Terry. Questions for Mr. Holman on any of those items, Ms. Patterson-Harris?
Thank you, Mayor. If I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to recall all of the locations for the affordable storages, and most of them are lined up similar to this with residential right back behind them. I know there's one specifically in District 2, right off of 50th, and in that area off of Q, and it butts right up against it. I'm trying to remember. I don't think that there's ever been an issue with regard to lighting. So you're saying, if my memory serves, it's a low or this type of lighting, so it does not shine very.
Correct. It's not high, whole mountain line. It's low level that is just inside of the facility itself.
Because I recognize that too, and that would be my only concern, and as long as it's being addressed, I
Understood.
wouldn't have any issue with it.
I would contend that any lighting we do would likely be far less obtrusive than a standard retail parking lot.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other questions for Mr. Holman? Thank you, Terry.
Another question, just comment. You got a haircut.
Both of them.
Okay, other people that would like to speak in favor of items tonight? Good evening.
Good evening. I own the property on 3602 24th Street, that case number 11.
Okay, so you're here to speak to us on case 711?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I see there are two oppositions on it, but I don't know why. What we do is we just use as an office. We don't treat any patients or anything. We just use for filing and answering phone calls and stuff. That's all we use that office for. We were not aware that we need to change the zoning when I bought the property, but then last year somebody came from the office. They said, oh, you need to change the zoning. That's why we came and applied for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Any questions for? Okay, we may call you up later. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Poster.
Thank you, Mayor. So Michael Poster, 3110 Frankfurt Avenue. I think it was about a year ago, Mr. Mastingale was talking about Lubbock not being a small town anymore, that now we are a city and not just a small city, a large city. This proves and shows where we're growing. So I'm very, very excited for Lubbock, and I can see the growth with our new outer loop and where everything is going. I'm excited, just excited y'all are, not even more. So being raised here and seeing everything grow like it is. So on my zone change, just answer a few questions. It's my typical storage facility with the lights inside, down low on the buildings, nothing up high. We actually do a solid brick wall around the entire exterior. That was part of our comprehensive land use package, even though we can't enforce that. It's just the way that I build all the self-storage facilities with everything inside, all the cameras. So it's state of the art, just like everything that you're seeing that's going up. So I just wanted to let y'all know I'm excited. We have a lot of storages going up here in the next couple of years. So thank you very much.
Questions, Mr. Poster? Thank you, sir. Thank you, Michael. Other proponents, other people that would like to speak in favor of any of the zoning items tonight?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Name's Ryan Burton, live at 3631 60th Street. I am in favor of 713 or case 3409. That is, my wife and I will be starting a preschool there is what we're looking at doing. Very high quality education that we're really excited for the area. Ideally located this space specifically to the south of Lubbock, so for the Cooper and the Friendship school districts. I think it'll be very beneficial for all the families and residential spaces out there. We are looking for apartment medical. We'll use the specific use of day nurseries, although it will be a school, preschool. I did send out letters and I communicated to the people around in the area that it's not an apartment building. We're not going to build anything other than what's already there. We're just using the space that's currently garden office to apartment medical. Traffic, as far as traffic is concerned, that was one thing I wanted to bring to your attention. I know Milwaukee is a pretty busy street. We do a staggered drop-off for parents, and it also is a half-day preschool, so it's not all day. So they're not all of the students that are there for the full day will come in the morning. So it'll be a session of either 8:30 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon, with a break from 12 to 1. And so, like I said, staggered drop-off, and we estimate about 20 vehicles, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on the enrollment from day one. Like I said, we think it'll be a great addition. The space looks like a home, it feels like a home, and that's why we thought it was different than anything else that's available here. A lot of the other half-day programs or churches in the area that just do basically a daycare service, and so we wanted to bring something that was a little bit more beneficial for the education side of children before they go into school. So,
thank you, Mr. Burton. Mr. Christian?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add some support to this project. I've seen this young man's plan, and it's very exciting. It's going to be first class, and they have a real heart for this project and for young children, and I think they'll be a great addition to this area. And they have done their homework and have spoken to the neighbors, both to the north and the south of them, and I'm very supportive of this venture. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. Okay, back to the public hearing. Any further, anybody that would like to speak in favor of any items tonight? Okay, one more time, anybody opposed to any of these items? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to consider these? I know we're going to consider 7-Eleven separately. Do you want to consider these individually? You want to consider them as a group? How would you like to do it? Individually, okay? Let's start then with item 7.2. It's on page 347. Is there a motion to begin consideration? Thank you, Ms. Joy. Thank you, Mr. Massengale. Let's see, this looks like Mr. Griffith has comment. Mr. Griffith.
I wanted to echo what Ms. Patterson-Harris said about 34th Street and how it's interesting that this for years has been zoned residential, R2, two-family district. But it's been businesses for a long time. I believe it was previously Adams Flower Shop for a number of years. So I'm glad to see some redevelopment on that corridor.
Right there in the heart of District 3, right? Okay, just want to make sure he didn't leave that out. Other comments on questions for staff, comments on item 7.2? Okay. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by that same sign? Motion carries 7-0. All right, we'll go now to item 7.3. Item 7.3, council, is on page 359. In order to begin discussion, is there a motion? Thank you, Ms. Patterson-Harris. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Giles. Comments, questions for staff on item 7.3? Mr. Chidis? Ready to vote, ready to pull the trigger. All right, I like that. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed by the same sign? Motion carries 7-0. And Mr. Chidis, I got that note. That means move along, Mayor. I got it, okay? Item 7.4 is next. It's on page 377. Is there a motion to begin consideration? Thank you, Ms. Joy. Thank you, Mr. Chidis. Is there discussion on this, Ms. Joy? No, you.
Not really. I am familiar with it. It's adjacent to, I believe, Mr. Holman, to the former location of Applebee's. I wish you'd do something with that one. Would help, but anyway, it's a good location for what you all are planning there. So, good luck.
Other comments or questions? Ms. Patterson-Harris is giggling down there. Would you like that comment about doing something with the Applebee's? So get down behind it. Yeah. Okay. All those in favor of the motion to approve item 7.4, please say aye. Any opposed by that same sign? The motion carries 7-0. Okay, let's move to item 7.5. It's on page 391. In order to begin discussion, is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Massengale. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Is there discussion on 7.5? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve item 7.5, please say aye. Opposed by that same sign? Motion carries 7-0. Let's go now to item 7.6. 7.6 is on page 408. In order to begin discussion on item 7.6, do we have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Massengale. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Giannis. Discussion, questions for staff on item 7.6. Okay, all those in favor of item 7.6, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by that same sign? Motion carries 7-0. We'll move next to item 7.7. It's on page 423. We have a motion for approval. Mr. Griffiths, is there a second? Thank you for that. Second, Ms. Joy. Is there discussion on item 7.7? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve item 7.7, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by that same sign? Motion carries 7-0. We'll move now to item 7.8. It's on page 442. In order to begin discussion, is there a motion on item 7.8? Thank you, Mr. Massingill. Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Is there discussion, questions for staff on item 7.8? Ms. Patterson-Harris.
Yeah, but I was just at this location just the other day and was kind of concerned of the amount of space to that area. Am I correct that that was a auto dealership right behind it, just across that wall? What is that actually?
Mr. Tyson, why don't you come up? I think the proponents may be here also. One of them may be able to come and answer a question too.
You're asking about the existing lot that we're
Yes,
attempting to rezone?
that's just across that wall from location. There's something, what is that there?
I don't know what the exact use was. If the proponent is here, he might be able to answer it for you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, I'm Robert. Across that building, just a Moxie building, it's just a regular home is what it is, just an office. It's there.
Okay.
The one that fronts University?
Just to the west of the location?
Yes, just to the west.
Oh, just to the west, okay.
Just to the
Yeah,
west.
that west,
So
right.
your plan is just to extend that so as those vehicles drive
Yes,
up there
'cause
to get detail or whatever?
Yes, sir. It's congested now because we have very few vacuums there. So what we're doing is we're gonna extend our vacuums to the west. So it's not congested because right now we have customers waiting for vacuums and we're worried that they're gonna be facing right off of University. So we're gonna get them more room, less congested to where it could free everything up.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
How would those individuals, once they come through the deal, I just happen to be familiar, come through and they pull up there to get their little tires done and
Yes.
whatever else you're doing there, how will they exit that location? Will they
Well-
go back around southbound or how will they come out once you extend?
At that location, there's certain services that we're not offering, only because of that reason. The only services that we are offering is just the hand dry, which is gonna be to the west of the property. We're not offering any tire and wheels, we're not doing any interior services, it's just wash, head to the west and to where we're not having it 2-3 vehicles at the end of the tunnel
Yeah.
to prevent any accidents.
Yeah, that was an issue the other
Yes,
day, that's why
yes.
I'm asking. Okay,
Yes, that's our
Thank you.
smallest location we have.
okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Robert while he's up? Yeah, Mr. Griffith?
How loud are those vacuums?
If they're all, at the end, I have my sheet there, the loudest part of the car wash is at the exit of the tunnel. At about 6-7 feet, it gets to about 80 to 120 decibels. The vacuums, if they're properly hung up in their holsters, you can have a polite conversation at your vehicle there. We have our staff continually monitoring them, walking the routes, checking for customers, and also just to make sure the vacuum hoses are in the holsters. If one of them's out, you could hear the whistling, but it's not an obnoxious sound, so.
Thank you for your answer, sir.
Yes.
What's the separation between the facility and that home?
The separation, I do not know. I know that there is a 7-foot containment wall, sound barrier that we have, that was there previously. We are going to tear that down and we're going to move that. We're gonna move it, I believe we're gonna go 8 foot with it, and it's still gonna be masonry. We're gonna have it going north to south, and then heading along 80th Street. So.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Yeah, Ms. Patterson-Harris.
Mr. Robert, I have one other question. With regard to the wall,
Yes.
how much of the sound does it alleviate from going over to the other side?
That I do not know. This will be I didn't do a decibel test. I know we had one done whenever we did our South Loop location, whenever it was a funeral home. There were some concerns there, but I couldn't find any information. The only information I had was
what the manufacturer gave me on the decibels.
Have you had any complaints or concerns at the other location where you had some of the same issue with regard to the fuel?
None at all. The only complaints we had is they're worried that vacuums, the little bit of a mist get on the cars. Never the noise of the vacuums.
Okay, thank you.
8 to 8. It used to be 9 o'clock. We put it down to 8 p.m.
Okay, Robert, I think that takes care of us. Appreciate it. Council discussion on item 7-8? Or questions for staff? Okay, we've got a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion to approve item 7-8 on first reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by that very same sign? Motion carries 7-0. We'll move out now to item 7-9. 7-9 is on page 460. In order to begin discussion, do we have a motion? Thank you, Ms. Joy. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Massengill. Is there any, councilors, any discussion on item 7-9? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by the same sign? That motion carries 7-0. We'll now move to item 7-11. It's on page 493. In order to begin discussion, is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Griffith. There's a second. Thank you, Mr. Massengill. Mr. Griffith.
This is in the medical district, and I know that there was 2 residents that were opposed. My biggest I do have a question for the proponent. Thank you for coming back up to ask you.
That's okay.
Earlier. You've continued to do business there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Even though you were denied this.
I came back because they did not send me the notice of the hearing. I came back and said they have denied it, and so we rescheduled it.
But you never received a notice at all?
No.
Okay. Really, you're operating improperly. Do you understand?
I didn't know it because when I bought the property, I used to live in Pampa. I asked the real estate person. We used to have business in that shopping area, office, just 2 blocks from there. And there are many other offices. So I asked him, and he suggested that building there, that house, And so we bought it and didn't know it till last year.
Well, I understand and I apologize, but I do think it's a problem because obviously the residents around you are
we
not in
don't
favor
have
of
that
it.
much traffic or anything. It's just people that come and go. So they never complained about anything to us that we know of.
I understand, but there is a lot of traffic on 24th in the medical district.
Right.
And I appreciate your wanting to be in your business in the medical district.
What
But I
I
also
did
have to
is-
respect that those
Yes.
citizens,
What we
those
did
homeowners
is,
around your neighborhood.
Right. What we did is we put a parking lot in the front so that nobody has to park in the street to block the traffic.
No.
But there are no other changes are going to be there. The house will be as a house.
Thank you.
Mr. Christian.
Thank you, Mayor. I remember this application vividly because I drove by it many times, and I'm very familiar with a doctor's facility at the corner down to the west of it. And it to me, it just reeked of asking forgiveness instead of permission on putting this, doing your remodeling. Somebody had to pull a permit to do that remodeling, and somebody should have notified you guys, whoever did the construction, the parking lot. There was a great deal of construction even going on in the backyard, turning this into an office. As Mr. Griffin said, we denied this. Matter of fact, the original permit is dated October of 2019. My point is we'll vote on this in a minute, but I was shocked when I saw this coming up for a second time. I think as a council, I would like to know from Mr. Atkinson is why has this come up again when we denied it last year? If you would be so kind as to explain that process.
Before, Mr. Christian, before we go to Mr. Atkinson, do you have any questions for the proponent, for Ms. Murguy?
Well, I'm just wondering who you were doing the construction. Who actually did this remodeling and construction for you? I would be curious to know who did that for you.
We were thinking of adding, but we are not going to add. So we were thinking of expanding that area in the back, in the backyard. But now we are not expanding anything. We just, because of the traffic on the streets, and so want our employees to be safe, so we just put a parking lot in the front instead of in the back.
But it was very clear in your mind in regards to Mr. Griffin's question that you were denied last year and you continue to operate that way.
That was that because I was not here for the hearing. They said they denied it. So they said they had some questions, but I was not here. I was not informed, so.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Atkinson for a clarification, then to Mr. Chavez. Mr. Atkinson, can you add any light? Can you answer Mr. Christian's question?
I believe I can, Mayor. I'll speak to 2 points. First, this item is back tonight. Your current zoning code, the way it is written, if this body denies a zoning change that was approved or recommended to be approved by the P&Z, the 12-month layout does not apply. If a zoning item comes before you that was not recommended for approval by the P&Z and ultimately not approved by the City Council, that is the type of action that is subject to a 12-month wait before it comes out. There's minor variations, but that's the basics to the two. Mayor and Council, I do owe you the answer, requested additional information today. Our staff did not notify the Murguys of your hearing that was held on January the 14th. That is correct. There was not direct notification provided. 2 days later, there was direct contact with the Murguys to inform them that the case was denied. So, additional information there.
Thank you. Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a troubling situation. I don't see favorable ending. I guess my question either to Mr. Isom or Mr. Atkinson, if this case were to be denied, where do we go? What's the next step? Maybe the legal department? I'm not sure which way to go with this. Who do I pose this question to? Because obviously they've been working out of, the building is out of compliance. So now what? If this were to be voted down, what happens?
If this is to be voted down tonight, that's ultimately the action of the council. That business is and continues to be operating in violation of the zoning code. The business will be cited, and ultimately that will be heard by your municipal court.
Okay. If I may make a suggestion, maybe the legal department, somebody will be consulting with the owners of this business to let them know what's fixing to happen. Well, what is our obligation to the business?
But whichever action the council chooses tonight, our staff will be in direct contact with the owners of that property tomorrow.
Okay.
And we will explain it. If it's ultimately approved, it is what it is, and that's now a legally operating business.
Okay.
If it is not approved, we will sit with them on that as well.
I strongly recommend that if it does not get approved, that everybody understands why this did not get approved, what the circumstances will be if it continues to operate unlawfully. I don't know if that's even the correct verbiage. And just a matter of information, please. Okay?
Yes, sir, we will.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Mr. Christian.
Mr. Mayor, I think this is a very troublesome issue to me for a lot of reasons, but it seems to me like we got a revolving door in regards to how people can continually apply over and over and over again if it's not voted down by both P&Z and this body. Is that correct? Mr. Atkinson?
That is basically correct, yes.
Mr. Mayor, I think this is something that needs to be corrected immediately. And I would suggest and like this body to have Mr. Atkinson and staff start putting together a plan to change this. And look at ways that this can't keep happening over and over again. It's like a hamster cage. It'll just keep going on over again, and I don't like this at all. I think we need to find something that we can change things so we won't be back in this situation again. And I want businesses to know that this is not a good thing, and we don't want this to happen in the future.
Thank you very much. I believe Ms. Joy would like to speak next, and then I'd like Mr. Eisen to come back and provide a little clarification on why it's back to us. So are you okay with him doing that first?
Yes.
Is that okay? Just because sort of to Mr. Christian's point, P&Z, this didn't go back to P&Z.
Yes,
It did.
It did.
And they didn't, so it went back to them,
And they
and they
recommended
approved it
approval.
unanimously again,
That is correct.
even in light of the fact that we had voted against it.
That is
What was the discussion like? I mean, they paved for yard a house. I mean, there's no street well. I drove it to work for many years. I don't understand how this could be considered a business. I mean, what was P&Z's discussion? I'd like to, I think some color on that would be interesting to me.
There really wasn't much discussion. Staff presented the case. Mr. Guy had her opportunity to speak, and there wasn't very much discussion on the item after that.
Thank you. Ms. Jordy, you mentioned.
While I have you, Mr. Isham, I was going to ask, to put back up the photographs of the neighborhood and the one that shows all of the zoning around it. Yeah, for example,
So here's the existing zoning.
the one that you have up there right now, everything in yellow is single family.
Is single family. And the teal color is, say teal, is apartment medical.
Okay. And so I guess my concern is if we change the zoning on this one piece, we just begin the encroachment in the rest of it. Is what it looks like to me. This is going to be the outlier that causes this block, and maybe the next block, I don't know. And that bothers me. We have to be, I don't think we can give legal advice to Ms. Murguy. I know that question was asked, but I don't think that we can do that. Someone else would have to do that. But I think this is just not acceptable, because it will affect that neighborhood. Now, it may not be this year or next year, but it will.
And then those were the existing photos that you asked to see too.
Those photos you're asking for, Ms. Joy? Yeah.
Yes, and that's the one in the upper left-hand corner is where they paved the parking lot that shows, how many vehicles are in there right now? 3 or 4?
I drove by twice today. There were 2 first thing this morning, and then 4 around about 11:30, 11:45.
Okay. And then all these other single-family residences are just exactly that. Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Chavez.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I find it troubling that we're in this situation, but more troubling so is that P&Z pretty much put all the weight back on our shoulders all over again after having rejected it, after having voted it down. And we've had this conversation already today. What do we need to do to alleviate this problem? Because at this rate, the public can continue coming back to us as long as P&Z continues to approve it, after we've already voted it down. That doesn't sit well with me either. Just a statement, Mayor. Thank you.
Good point. We'll ask staff to look at that. I think Mr. Weaver could help us with some input on that, working with planning. Okay, anything else from Mr. Ison while we have him up here? Thank you, Brian. Council, Mr. Massagill?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. I don't like the situation we've been placed in. I'm concerned the proponent probably doesn't fully understand the circumstances. Maybe you need to get some advice on it. The driveway is the problem. The driveway is the problem, and it puts us in a difficult situation and a hard decision to make. So.
Mr. Griffith.
Thank you.
Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mayor. When was the curb cut done on the side street? Do we have that?
Ma'am, can you come back up, please? Ms. Murguy.
I'm sorry, thank you for coming back up. When was the curb cut done at the same time that the paving was done?
Right,
You're talking about on Knoxville?
Yes, on Knoxville.
yes.
Okay,
The person that his name was Hector Garcia.
okay.
And I had come to the office to ask them they said it's residential, you can do whatever you want to do. So I can ask them for the backyard.
We can't, and this has been mentioned before in some of our other council members, but we can't give you legal advice. But I would recommend you visit with him again, because that it should have never happened that way. Please understand, we apologize at the same time, and we want you to be successful in business, but at the same time, you basically put a business in a residential area that wasn't zoned for it.
It's an office, it's not a retail business.
Well, an office houses business, and
There's
understand.
so many offices in that area too, in the house.
I know this, but it's in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
Thank you.
Sorry, but thank you. We appreciate you coming up here and speaking with us.
Thank you, Ms. Murguy. Council, is there further discussion or questions? Okay, we've got a motion to approve item 711. We've got the ability to vote, and we'll use our electronic voting capability on this one, if you would. So I'll open the floor for your votes.
I don't have any place to take the business of that storage and all that.
Looks like I've got 6 of it, maybe one person, okay, got 7, okay. Stop. Okay, so the motion fails 0 to 7. Moving now to item 712. 712 is on page 509. In order to begin discussion, is there a motion? Thank you, Ms. Joy. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Chidas. Council, is there discussion on item 712? All those in favor of the motion to approve 712 on the first reading, please say aye. Opposed by that same sign? Motion carries 7-0. Move now to item 713. It's on page 523. In order to begin discussion, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Chidas. Is there a discussion on item 713? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve item 713, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed by that same sign. Motion carries 7-0. All right, that concludes our public hearings. We have one more item from planning. It's item 714. And in order to begin discussion on item 714, is there a motion? Is there a motion on item 714? All right, item 714 fails for lack of a motion. We'll move to item 715. Item 715 is an ordinance from finance. It's on page 551. It's related to item 716 on page 597. I would like to, before we get a motion, let's go get an overview from Mr. Koslich on items 715 and 716. Mr. Koslich.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So item 715 and 16 are what we typically consider parameters ordinances for debt issuance. Tonight, Mayor, is the final step, final council action that needs to be taken before we actually issue our debt related to the new project that we had approved in this year's budget. So to remind you, the process that we go through is first, when we are preparing this year's budget, we always have some projects that we intend to fund with cash and some projects that we intend to debt finance. So those that are approved in the budget, after that budget becomes effective on October 1st, we bring you for your consideration and approval a parameters ordinance. I'm sorry, a reimbursement resolution. That reimbursement resolution allows us to go ahead and start those projects and pay cash up front for those that we intend to issue debt for later. Now, as we get closer to the actual debt issuance period, we then bring you the notice of intent to publish, or notice of intent to issue debt, and we have to publish that in a local newspaper and on our website. We have done all three of those steps. So this tonight, Mayor and Council, is the final step in this process, where we are asking you to approve a parameters ordinance, so that when we do go to market with these with this debt issuance, that we meet certain parameters that you have given us, the guidance that you have given us, so that we can move forward with these projects. So tonight, Mayor, we have Mr. Matt Bowles, our city's financial advisor from RBC Capital, with us. He's going to give you a little bit of a market update, market overview, and kind of our preliminary numbers on this 2020 new issuance. Before we go to in your packet, we did find that there's an error in item 715 in section 3.01A, the uses of the funds. Has an error in that, so we have new wording, we have a new ordinance. The notice of intent that you passed on March 24th has the correct usage. So we're asking you in your motion, should you approve this, to approve with the language that Mr. Kyle has provided to us, and I can hand that to anybody up at the dais.
That'd be fine. That's on item 715.
715, Mayor.
Yes.
Yes.
Please hand this to Mr. Christian, if you would, Mr. Koslich. We'll call on Randy when we get to that point. Okay? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. And now we'll bring up Mr. Matt Bowles to give you a little bit of market update.
You need some training there, Mr. Bowles?
Absolutely, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I could talk about where you went to college and all that. I'd get grief when I got home, so I'll just leave it alone and
right
let
off the bat.
Right. It's good to see your smiling face. You look better in person, so we want you to know that. Yeah.
Mayor, it's great to see you too. Members of the council, Mr. Atkinson, thank you, Mr. Koslich, for your nice warm up there. It's nice to be back in Lubbock, and for me back in action. This is my first public meeting in just over 7 weeks now, so it's great to start back in the great city of Lubbock and talk about your financing tonight. There's been a lot that's been going on in the last 7 or 8 weeks here, notwithstanding the public health crisis, but in our marketplace, and I'm pleased to report that Our market is resilient, and it is recovering, and it is showing great signs of life, and we're encouraged by what we see, and I'm going to touch on that as we get through this presentation that's in front of you. The first thing I want to talk about, as Blue said, is the marketplace. It initially, and by initially I mean the first couple of weeks of this pandemic, was essentially non-existent. The buy side, so all investors essentially went to the sidelines, sought safe havens, and because of that we saw an extreme sell-off in our marketplace that drove rates to a point that was completely unpredictable 3 months ago. I'm pleased to report now that we have returned to some level of trading and underwriting that is more normal and in keeping with what you all have been expecting to see in the marketplace. And in fact, I'm going to show you some information in just a little bit that shows you that we are operating right at historical all-time lows again, which is just phenomenal. So it's a great time to be an issuer of municipal bond debt. But on this particular page, just a couple things that I want to point out, because we're going to get to this here in just a little bit. In the lower right-hand corner is what we call the great decoupling of the Treasury and muni market. No longer can you simply look at the Treasury market to be a predictor or precursor of municipal bond rates. U.S. Treasury rates have been a safe haven globally, and because of that and the demand and the strong demand for securities essentially across the curve, you've seen extreme buying in 30, 10, and 5-year notes. Today we had the largest ever 10-year note auction. It went quite well. In fact, the Treasury market rallied into that auction sale, which was a great sign. And so we see some stability there, but just understand that marketplace has completely decoupled from the municipal marketplace. So if we go to this next page, page 4, in the lower left-hand corner, I think this graph says a whole lot. This is MMD, municipal market data. It's an index of AAA obligations, and this shows an indicative curve for 3 separate measures. One is the all-time low, which is in the dark blue bar there. The lighter blue shaded bar is the 15-year average. And then the green bar is May the 8th, so very close to where we sit today, and it lays right on top of the all-time low, which was struck in 2016, July 6th to be exact. So notwithstanding the first 7 years of that curve, we are at all-time lows. And so as we talk about the 2 transactions that you all are proposing for these 2 ordinances tonight, just rest assured that you, as a AA rated credit in both of these liens that we're going to talk about, you will be well received. I have great confidence in that. The only other thing I might show here is what I've started off with, and that's the decoupling. In the lower right-hand corner of this page, you'll see the tax-exempt 10-year AAA, and then the U.S. Treasury 10-year, which is AAA by 2 agencies. And you can see that they're upside down. And by that I mean it should be that the muni curve is just underneath the Treasury curve, and you see that going all the way back to 2016. It's upside down right now. And I do believe that in time that will correct itself. It's irrational to think that that will continue. It would suggest that we don't have a marginal income tax system in this country, and we clearly do. So I believe that will right itself, but don't let that deter you from the other graph that we looked at earlier. Rates are in quite good shape for you all to be issuing in this marketplace. And just to make you feel better about that, the top portion of this next page is the bond buyer index. Again, just another index that we look at on a weekly basis in this circumstance. This goes all the way back to the Kennedy administration, 1961. The index rate for this week is 2.6%. This is a general obligation index. And you can see in the blue bar in the middle of the page, 99.5% of the time since 1961, rates have been higher. So we are at or near all-time lows in this index as well. And then just to be very granular as we talk about 10-year rates, 20-year rates, and 30-year rates, this again is MMD. This is a AAA muni index out to the right-hand side. We have a blown-up portion of the graph there, and you can see that, yes, we did in fact experience a dramatic increase in all 3 of those measures across the board, and it lasted for a solid 3 weeks, but we have now normalized. And in fact, the last 4 trading days have been exceptional trading days where we've seen rallies across the muni curve. RBC Capital Markets priced a transaction this morning for the city of Carrollton when it was all said and done we're able to lower rates in the back end of this loan by 13 basis points. So there is real strength and demand in the marketplace for high-grade credits like yourself.
Mr. Bowles, how much of that has to do with the, some of the extraordinary things we've seen from the Fed and the Treasury? I mean, I know that helps overall sentiment, but you're not talking about any of the specific situation where they've come in and come into this market and done some special things.
Correct. This has, yes, market sentiment, one's understanding and comfort around the marketplace has certainly been buoyed by the Fed's action, but the Fed is not directly injecting liquidity into the market to buy these bonds. These are real bona fide going away investors that are buying for their own portfolios, not the Fed.
Thank you.
The next section, and I'll move through this as quickly as possible, focuses on the two new issuance for your 2020 issuance season. One transaction will occur in your certificates of obligation ordinance, and the other will occur in your water and wastewater ordinance, both of which are on your agenda for possible approval tonight. And then the projects that will be financed out of that lie in the middle of this page, with the exception of one that relates to the Lowhead C pump station. The city is working currently with the Texas Water Development Board on a subsidized loan program there that would fund $10 million of that $27.8 million project. So if we flash forward a page here, both of these loans are 20-year loans. The top bullet point there, we are pleased to report that the city's staff did a wonderful job this year, had to modify plans a little bit around rating agency meetings. The mayor participated in making those presentations to Fitch and S&P. They affirmed your AA plus ratings on your certificates, so your general obligation rating by Fitch and S&P is AA plus, both agencies. And then on the water and wastewater system, both Fitch and S&P affirmed your AA minus ratings there, and those are essentially the ratings that are baked into the scales that we're going to talk in a little bit. Now, I'll caution you that because yields have been compressed so far in the yield curve for water and wastewater bonds and certificates of obligation, you're not going to see a discernible difference between the two. It's we're getting to the point where those curves are so low now that they're essentially touching one another with some minor differences that manifest themselves essentially in the way the bonds are amortized. So it is quite nice to be a AA rated credit in this marketplace is how I would summarize that statement. If we look at the projected results of the certificates on page 10, I've highlighted well, let me just go through this. On the right-hand side of the page is what we project your annual debt service payments will be if we price with the scale that was used 2 or 3 days ago now. I know from reads that we've gotten from your underwriting syndicate that those are actually a little bit high, so we've got a little cushion in here. But in the middle of the page, we've got all sorts of statistical information there. The most important of which I wanted to point out is in the blue shaded bar, which is the true interest cost, right at 3%. So 3% money for 20 years with an optional par call in 10 years. And then the same type of information on page 11, but for the water and wastewater bonds, Series 2020. On the far right-hand side, we have the amortized debt for 20 years. You can see what the debt service would be on that. And then in the middle of the page, the true interest cost would be 303, so about 3 basis points difference. Now, that may all change tomorrow, the next day when we price this transaction, once we know what investor demand will be, couponing, et cetera. But I do believe that we are going to get a very robust response. Investors are essentially went to the sidelines for, let's call it a 3-week period. They begin to show back up, knocking on the door, and whenever a city of Lubbock walks into the marketplace with that type of credit and this type of structure and all of the policies and procedures that you all continue to put forward and make part of your plan here, you will be well received. So that's information on those two transactions. The final page on page 12 is just a recap of the timetable. Obviously, I am here on May the 12th for your possible action on these two items. We may price tomorrow or Thursday, depending on what the market is looking like. We have a call early in the morning to review the marketplace in the morning. As my underwriter said, it was white hot today, so if the market is in good shape, we may do this in the morning. And I believe that closes my remarks, with the exception that I should say I did have the chance, and I apologize for not being able to be at your last council meeting where Mr. Kostelich made this presentation, and it scared me. It scared me for my job. He did such a great job. I was sitting there watching that saying, this guy really has got me down. So, or I have him down. Maybe I should say it that way. But it's great to be back, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Bowles? Matt, both of these have that 10-year callable.
Yes, sir, Mayor.
Isn't that right? You mentioned on the first one, they both have that same
Yes,
capability.
correct.
Is
I
that
didn't,
correct?
should have mentioned on the second one, correct.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah, we're glad that time has sort of healed some things. Mr. Kostelich had to do some dancing when he was trying to explain the market to us. So maybe that's a good reason for you to come out here and deliver good news. Yeah.
Show up in good time.
Yeah, that's right. Your timing is impeccable, Mr. Bowles. Okay. Anything else from Mr. Bowles or Mr. Kostelich? Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may, one quick
Please,
thing.
yes.
I know that whenever Mr. Kostelich briefed the council, we talked about the potential for possible refunding candidates. One might suggest that this is a good time to refinance debt. However, the debt that we were looking at refinancing would need to be refinanced with taxable debt. And so, as I illustrated earlier in my presentation, those rates are out of whack with and not consistent with the principles we would deploy to refinance your debt. So we'll continue to watch that, and should that come back, we'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? I know Mr. Kyle's here too, if you have any legal questions. Any questions on? Okay, so let's, Ms. Joy, I'll open the floor to a motion on 7:15.
Okay, move to approve the ordinance as presented, substituting clauses i and i in the resolution adopted on March 24th, authorizing publication of notice of intent to issue the certificates of obligation for clauses i through v in section 3.01A. Did that get it?
Okay. Is there a second? Got a motion and a second. Mr. Weaver, are we okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on this item? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, as it was read by Ms. Joy, please indicate your support by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed by that very same sign. That motion carries 7-0. Okay, we'll move now to 7:16. There's really no further. We took both of those from an overview standpoint together. Is there a motion to approve item 7:16? Thank you, Mr. Masco. Is that a second, Ms. Patterson-Harris? It is. Thank you, Ms. Patterson-Harris. Is there discussion on item 7:16? Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for verification on 7:16, obviously this is, we're waiting on Water Development Board that will change some of the dynamics of this, but Mr. Kostelich, what does this do to our water rates, wastewater rates?
This, nothing. It's already been planned into the rates that are currently set today, so it doesn't change anything.
I just wanted the public to hear that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kostelich. Anything else, Mr. Griffith? No. Other questions or comments? There's a smile on your face down there. Okay, all those in favor of the item 7:16, please say aye. Any opposed by the same sign? Okay, that motion carries 7-0. Council, thank you very much for your attention this afternoon, staff. We appreciate you guys. I think it's appropriate that we close this meeting by really giving the staff that has much to do with getting this place built a lot of credit. Darren's in the back. Wes is to the right over here. Wes has pulled special duty in the last week as he's tried to train the untrainable. That would be the city council on this technology up here. Most foremost, me and the mayor. So, no, it's good to be at Citizens Tower. It's just good to be here. Somebody was asking me today about the situation, and they wanted me to explain it. And I said, well, this was originally Citizens National Bank, and that the mayor pro tem started calling this Citizens Tower before we ever did anything here. And so I know that Ms. Joy and Mr. Griffith were on the council that made the decision, sort of stood strong and made a decision to rehab this building. And 4 of us were elected shortly thereafter, and Randy joined us a couple years later, and we've all been on this journey. And so I'm thankful for the Facilities Committee and your leadership. But for the entire team, it's certainly a team effort, and so thank you for your effort to get us here. I look forward to being able to open it up and show it to our citizens when it's appropriate to do that. We'll have a nice event to do that. A party, yes, that's exactly right. But we're not going to do that tonight. And it's 7:02. It's a great day in Lubbock, Texas. We're adjourned.